Hey everyone. On the recent Kongversation mini where I gave my first impressions of Yooka-Laylee, I used the curious render of Yooka-Laylee for the episode artwork seen on YouTube and SoundCloud. Many people expressed befuddlement over the quality of it, thinking it looked overly symmetrical. Well, as it turns out, this was a fan-made render created by Reddit user u/zogar that somehow wound up in DK Vine's folder of assets. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to u/zogar, the Platonic art team, render aficionados around the world, and especially the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. As penance for my transgression, I've decided to fast for 7 days. I hope this small bit of self-sacrifice can begin to make up for my egregious crimes. Thank you.
I've been swallowed by a great wave! I usually love being inside a shark, but not like this!
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle. Here for another episode. You all sick of me already?
Well, you are only on a mini episode, so I would say they're only about 1/3 sick of you. So, when this episode has about 30 minutes left, we'll make you go sit in the corner, and I'll rotate in Nick or Matt or somebody. So, you're on a ticking time here, Cameron. The sand is going through the hourglass, so you better make the most of it. No, you can talk now. That's fine. I'm just saying, as we get closer, we're going to be sick of you. All right. Well, I assume you've played Yooka-Laylee by now, Cameron.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. No. I kind of know what your impressions are just because we've been talking about it off air. So I don't really have that much need to worry. But in case you missed it, in case you only listened to the regularly numbered conversations, we did a conversation mini on Sunday because I got an early released copy of Yooka-Laylee to kind of play out, to kind of get the word out about my thoughts on the game. I gave it pretty glowing praise, spoiler-free glowing praise, on Sunday. A lot of people were kind of skeptical. It's funny the reactions it gets from our audience, because there were some people who were so desperate for Yooka-Laylee to be good that they took my word as if it were carried down from Moses on some stone tablets. And then other people just like completely disowned me because they so want to believe the negative critical reaction for some reason that obviously I was just full of shit, and this was another Donkey Kong 64 type situation where my teenage self gave glowing, lavish praise on Donkey Kong 64, basically slobbered its knob a bit, and that has haunted both me and Chad to this very day. Despite the fact that now everybody is super nostalgic for Donkey Kong 64, and we're the assholes for now having a negative opinion about it. So I didn't realize what a fucking minefield just giving my first impressions of Yooka-Laylee was going to be here on the Kongversation. So, are you sure you want to do this, Cameron? Because apparently this is a politically charged game. Everything is political now. Yay!
I've been having fun with it.
Yeah, I have too. I've been playing it a bit more since now everybody's, of course. Some people have already 100% beat it, and I'm just... It makes me feel sad. I don't know for whom it makes me feel sad. If it makes me sad for me, because I take my time and I linger, and it makes me feel somewhat inferior, or if I feel sad for the people who beat it within a day and then have nothing more to look forward to. And yes, we all play games that are different speed and we all derive our own enjoyment from it. Some people, that's how they get enjoyment out of games, is playing it as fast as possible. While you have freaks like me who like to spend more than half a week on a single world, making sure I don't miss a single detail. So we all beat, to the drum of our own DK bongos, but I don't know. I just want to clarify to our listeners, because I know some of you listening to this have already beaten the game, and I am not really spoiled beyond where I am at this point, which is essentially at the end of World 1. So we will not be getting into any spoilers beyond World 1, nor should we, because this episode will be spoiler-free after World 1. We will spoil World 1 for you quite a bit. Everything up through, let's say, the basic completion of World 1. We will spoil that for you. But anything beyond that, you don't have to worry about. So if you're not that far in the game, or, if you're a couple worlds in, you're not going to hear how the game ends from us. So don't worry about that. But I would recommend, if you're waiting for the Switch version, if you still haven't gotten your copy in the mail, or if you've just barely cracked the game open and you want to experience it for yourself, maybe wait to listen to this episode until you finish World 1. I don't want to ruin the episode for you. If you don't care, that's fine. Let's spoil it for you, whatever. But that being said, I don't want to deprive anybody of the enjoyment of this game, which, let's face it, our community of like-minded weirdos has spent the last 2 years kind of obsessing over. So
I'd also just add, in full disclosure, I've had the game since it unlocked on Tuesday. Probably put an hour each night into it, so a little bit at a time. And because I don't think either of us are all that far, we may even say some things like purely speculation that end up being wrong by the time we're done.
Right.
So, yeah, save your correction notes to the end.
Yeah, please. I don't want to have to do another correction next week. So we are in the dark, except for essentially through World 1, maybe a little bit beyond that. But anyway, we'll get into it. But first, I think we should do some due diligence, because we do have some new listeners, and we've got to shamelessly shill ourselves for them before they realize we're hucksters. Support DK Vine on Patreon. It's dkvine.com/Patreon. We are completely financed through you, the viewers. And while we won't give you a nice tote bag like PBS, we will give you, just for $1 a month, we will send you complimentary DK Vine stickers. Now, these stickers can be used on any indoor setting. Don't get them wet. They're like gremlins. You won't want them wet. Don't feed them after midnight either. But they are the 2017 series of DK Vine stickers, because this is the second series. We do a new series every year.
If people really want to get our Patreon rewards wet, maybe we need to invest in dinosaur sponges or something.
That would be really cool. Maybe, well, I don't want to step on any of legitimate ideas that Platonic might have. I was going to suggest a Rextro sponge, but we might have to just stick with Tricky, because Nintendo doesn't give a shit about Tricky. No, we've got lovely characters like that beloved duo, Strange Frog and Wacky Owl. You know them. And, of course, there's always Funny Monkey, the banana-loving primate with the necktie. And, of course, who can forget Nice Sailor Bloke? I can't wait to see his cameo in Ocean of Miscreants. Anyway, you can also get more rewards. For example, $2 a month gets you the Kongversation 24 hours before everybody else. $5 a month lets you listen to this nonsense live as we record it. You get to hear all of the warts. And when I say warts, I mean warts. I mean you will have
We're just going to go on a big
skin.
Super Mario. We're just going to go on a big Super Mario Brothers 2 tangent halfway through each episode.
Honestly, we do have these off-topic episodes every now and then. I don't know if there's any way I could justify doing an honorary mentions episode for Super Mario Brothers 2, but I would honestly love to discuss it someday because that and Super Mario World are my favorite Marios, and I think it speaks to what appeals to me as a gamer, that those are the Mario games I gravitate towards, because you talk to the elite, the brains of what makes proper gaming culture, and most will tell you Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3. So anyway, but I would love to do an episode about Super Mario Brothers 2, especially the Tanabe connection with him and Tropical Freeze. There's been a lot of inspiration in our series from both Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario World. So yeah, that would be fun one day, maybe someday. Who knows? But anyway, the episode I recorded, the last actual full episode of the Kongversation, episode 211, I recorded that with Matt Corna. There was an hour of content we recorded that didn't make it into the final episode, and that can only be heard if you listen to us live, or you can also go back within 14 days and hear it in our secret Twitch channel. So if you really want to see how this sucker gets made, sometimes it all goes in. Other times we have to take a hatchet to it because we are so horribly offensive that we know
there's a lot of fingers in that sausage that have to be plucked out.
Indeed. Anyway, $10 a month also gets you DK Vine bumper stickers. You can get those wet, and I have personally tested all of them out with my own special method. That's not going to be the only ejaculation joke I make on this show, by the way. Thanks to Yooka-Laylee, there has been a shocking number of cum jokes. So, for an E-rated game, I think it even outclasses Conquer there, because I can't remember any semen references in Conquer. Maybe, I mean, along the same lines, I think it was a Pollination joke, but it's far more grotesque the way Yuka goes about it. So anyway, that's our Patreon. Support us. It helps us out. It helps us produce more content. I essentially do DK Vine for a living right now. Don't ask me how I make it work. It barely works. But the more we get patrons like you, the more time I can actually devote to DK Vine, the better site it can be, and the stronger it becomes for all of us. Speaking of DK Vine, we have a website. It's called DK Vine. Check it out, dkvine.com. We also have a DK Vine forum, and I would check that out because Cameron here has introduced a whole slew of new Platonic avatars, all from Yooka-Laylee, given that's the only Platonic game right now. But it's exciting to see these characters who we've spent so long speculating about finally join the ranks of such beloved icons like Sprout from Donkey Kong 64 and Booker from Donkey Kong 64 and what's another one? Weddle from Donkey Kong 64.
It just doesn't feel like somebody's made it until you've seen them in a 71 by 62 pixel PNG file.
Mm-hmm. They're lovely, Cameron. And by the way, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the forum, if you've been there within the past couple years, you'll know we have a Platonic discussion, but that is now under Donkey Kong Universe discussion. Now that Ukulele is out and we have enough confirmation that it takes place within the Donkey Kong universe, thanks to two slightly dubious character connections, we can move Platonic discussion up to Donkey Kong Universe as a new branch of the Donkey Kong universe. The first new branch we've had. I guess technically you can make the argument General DKU discussion was made an official branch when Rare Replay came out in 2015. But if you want to split hairs, this is the first full new branch of the Donkey Kong universe since Fish and Chaps, which I think really became a thing when It's Mr. Pants came out, or was it when Viva Pinata came out? Somewhere along the early to mid buyout era, Fish and Chaps became a thing. It was a way to shore up all of the Banjo-Kazooie spin-offs. Once upon a time, we classified Grab by the Ghoulies as a Banjo-Kazooie game. God, how weird is that? Am I right?
And I think for future-proofing purposes, it's probably a good thing that Playtonic can split off into its own branch of the DKU, because it sounds like if the studio has its way, you're not just going to have a branch, you're going to need a full tree for Yooka-Laylee.
Yeah, well, that is true. Of course, that raises the question, are those cameo games? Or, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. As far as the Kongversation goes, call the DK Vine hotline at 1-281-410 KONG. Almost every week, not every week, but almost every week, we'll play calls. We don't play every call, but we play most calls. And we let you express your thoughts on the air being on the internet. Because you can't express your thoughts anywhere on the internet but a podcast. And we'll interact with you, and we'll probably make fun of you a little bit. That's 1-281-410-KONG, Kong 5664. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes if that's your bag. Rate us on iTunes. Tell your friends about the Kongversation. You can also listen to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Stitcher, as well as you can get a direct MP3 file off DK Vine. Finally, hashtag bring back the spiders. All right, Cameron, enough of that. Let's talk about Yooka-Laylee. Now, I gave my first impressions, but I had to be delicate because it was our first time discussing Yooka-Laylee, and I didn't want to cause bleeding. But the bloom is off the rose, and we can go full thrust into spoilers as far as Shipwreck Creek and Tribalstack Tropics. So I want to get into this because I love Shipwreck Creek, Cameron, and I've had quite a good time with Tribalstack Tropics. But before we get to that, I would like to get into your first impressions. Because I had that luxury and you did not. You were just my clueless wingman on Sunday. But now you've played the game. So tell me, Cameron, are the critics right? Is Yooka-Laylee nostalgia done wrong?
Oh, gee, way to suck any opportunity for nuance out of this.
I love you, Kotaku. Never change.
I guess short answer is I'm enjoying it a hell of a lot. I'm getting what I wanted out of this game, and depending on who you are, depending on your personal preference, it may not be for you. I would say,
if you don't have a soul, this game is not for you. You're welcome, Platonic. You can use that as a pull quote, by the way. Wink.
Like, I guess how I would phrase this is, like, I'll give the example, Banjo-Tooie, as I did last week. One of my favorite games of all time. Like, I'd say freaking masterpiece. But if somebody told me they had a specific problem, like, say, oh, it takes forever to walk anywhere, or I don't like having sections of the game gated off that I have to come back to, I would think that's a valid opinion to have, and it just means your priorities differ from mine.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say doesn't kind of... What's come out from some critics that I kind of don't gel with is the idea that the flaws that critics are finding in Yooka-Laylee have roots in Banjo-Kazooie, in Banjo-Tooie, in DK64 that...
Well,
they phrased essentially saying these are problems that have existed before and just haven't been rectified, and you notice it more now because this is a modern game. And I'd challenge that because, honestly, the portions of Yooka-Laylee that I could see some people finding kind of iffy that don't particularly bother me, those aren't issues I would have perceived with Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's kind of going with a predetermined narrative to suggest otherwise to me.
Yeah, and I also think, and this is something I kind of want to touch upon as we wrap the episode up, but this is a discussion we were actually having in the DK Vine Inner Circle, which you can join on Patreon if you back us for $25 a month. It's the elite tier.
Did Capital B take over this show? Because it feels like it.
No, because we're just the plucky startup, Cameron. When we eventually sell DK Vine itself to Phil Spencer and Microsoft. Or wait, is that just an allegory? Okay, anyway. No. I was going to save this for the end of this, but we were talking about this in Inner Circle a little bit, about how there is a lot more leeway for 8-bit revivals, 8-bit nostalgia from the gaming press than there is this. And there's something about the generation that DK Vine celebrates, the late 16-bit through 64-bit era, that kind of we're kind of like the Lost Boys a little bit, and girls, but the Lost Boys was a movie. Just that when gaming journalism became a thing, it was the first generation of gamers. So they held up the NES and that era as unimpeachable. And when the internet first kind of became a necessary household utility, not just like the late 90s when it was starting to appear in homes, but around the early aughts, post 9/11, when it high-speed internet was just an affordable thing that people would have, and it started to become necessary for people's way of life rather than niche tech heads or families who were ahead of the curve. That was the GameCube, the PS2, the original Xbox era. So kids from that era kind of started like framing the narrative. Our generation, and I say our generation, I know you're younger than me, Cameron, but I'm grandfathering you in. Our generation has kind of been lost a little bit as far as being the tastemakers of what is perceived as gaming. And I feel like 3D platformers have been one of the biggest victims of that. And the fact that this whole genre basically disappeared more than a decade ago, I might speak to that. So when gaming journalists say this stuff, I have to think we are really in the woods here as far as what our likes, our preferences are. And thank God we have our own support network of all of these rare fan sites to kind of keep this flame alive, because we do exist. We are out there, but we've kind of been shut out of the narrative, with some exceptions, obviously. I'm not saying like I'm not advocating for reforms in gaming journalism. Oh no, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna. This isn't an Adam Baldwin argument here, but yeah.
You're gonna need Shovel Knight to dig yourself out of the hole. You just.
And this is not about ethics in gaming journalism, people. This is just about something I've noticed, and a lot of DK Viners have noticed, that, yeah, it seems like some things get leeway if it's from a certain generation or caters to a certain generation. And hell, you see it with Nintendo's preferences and things like Smash Brothers. They'll constantly pull from every era but our era when it comes to things like, Smash Brothers or just nostalgia in general.
And so I would say that's not to imply that any negative criticism of this game is unfounded or just from somebody who's not in it deep enough.
Look, I have criticisms to give. I have criticisms to give now that I played the game longer. However, these criticisms are not deal breakers for me. They do not deprive from the experience of Yooka-Laylee. And this might be what Matt and I discussed, the last episode when we were talking about Donkey Kong Land 3, I think, and just how much more our generation in particular is willing to put up with minor things. Like, these things don't kill the game for me, my criticisms of Yooka-Laylee. The game is so much fun that the few times I'm just kind of like, I don't really care for that. It's not a deal breaker, you know?
Yeah, and it's even so much not just what may be a deal breaker for somebody else that isn't a deal breaker for you, but something you may really, really enjoy that somebody else might just kind of have a lukewarm reaction to.
Right. It's just like how we play games. We don't all enjoy games the same way. So I understand that. But the problem with any professional gaming criticism, it's not taking other perspectives into account. It's essentially saying, this is the way I feel, so this is what we're publishing.
Right. And I just basically wanted to spell out there is no, like, oh, if you don't enjoy this game, you're not a true fan. That's always a fallacy. And I mean, we have friends in our circles to this day who clash on whether or not, like, Banjo-Tooie is great, if DK64 is great, if Conquer is great.
We have people who, like, legitimately argue against Donkey Kong Country 2 on the forum, who say Country and Country 3 are superior, which is pretty much the most sacrilegious thing you would think could be spoken on DK Vine. But yet, it's a valid opinion, So,
yeah.
I think, I'll be bringing up some criticisms, but I feel like a good analogy is that Banjo-Kazooie, the original Banjo-Kazooie, is a finely tuned piece of classical music, which ironic when you incorporate banjos into it. But Yooka-Laylee, on the other hand, is more freestyle jazz. It's not as elegant, it's not as refined, but it still has merits. There are merits to that game design. And I think, because a lot of people are going to want to pull out Donkey Kong 64 comparisons, but Hyle, you liked Donkey Kong 64 when it came out, and you were wrong. That game was terrible. Well, Donkey Kong 64 isn't terrible, okay? It's a playable game. Donkey Kong 64 is tedious. Donkey Kong 64 is not a lot of fun. But it's not a terrible game. It's playable, and there are lots of enjoyable elements to it. Yooka-Laylee is not Donkey Kong 64. From what I've experienced, it is a lot more smartly designed than DK64. Donkey Kong 64 went all in on bloat for the sake of bloat, and it didn't have any real fun challenges to justify that bloat. Yooka-Laylee has a lot of fun challenge. It's more Banjo-esque in its design. So it's just I don't want to say it's sloppy, because that implies that's too harsh in my opinion. But it's just more scattershot. I don't know. Help me out here, Cameron. I don't want to dig myself into a hole again.
I'd say, and I don't want to get too much into this, because I think in the process of getting a little bit defensive about Yooka-Laylee, it kind of sounds like we're tearing into it inadvertently.
Yeah, ironically enough, but
I'd say there's a very particular set of notes being hit here that you'll either be extremely into, which is the category I fall into at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
Or, you might be a little ho-hum about, or it may just not be the experience for you. And I think you can kind of clue into that based on how you reacted to the pre-release material.
Yeah.
Like, I would say if the initial Kickstarter video, if it didn't do anything for you right at the start, it's not going to do much for you now. I don't think there's anything I could show you that will magically get you on board.
And part of the problem too is when you have a 3D platform in Revival that's based in the whole Rare aesthetic, vibe, philosophy. Well, do you base it on Banjo-Kazooie? Do you base it on Banjo-Tooie? There are fans of Donkey Kong 64. Obviously, Yooka-Laylee in its name and in its structure is more of a Banjo spiritual successor. But, you know, you've got to please a lot of people. And I think Yooka-Laylee kind of goes for broke in a lot of places. And I think it tries to cast a wide net to try to please as many classic Rare fans as possible. You've definitely got influences from Tooie in here. Kazooie is kind of the template, but it really goes off in its own directions. You do have elements of a Donkey Kong 64 collectathon, that more so than, you know, in the Banjo games, but it's kind of reined in a great deal and simplified.
And that kind of makes it fascinating to play. It's in many ways like playing Banjo-Kazooie with like a sideways lens, where every now and then you'll get introduced to this, because you get in a sort of comfort zone with this kind of game. Like, yeah, I've been around the block. I know the rules to these 3D platformers. Let's just get into it.
Yeah.
But every now and then it'll throw a new mechanic or a new aspect of its design at you that kind of surprises you, takes you off guard, and in a good way.
I love how challenging it is. I mean, have you been challenged by it? Because it's been surprising me how much of a non-cakewalk this is. This is actually really putting my gameplay skills, you know, to the test in some areas. Because I just expected it to be a stroll through the park, you know? Oh, yeah, whatever. Rare 3D platformer. I can do this in my sleep. But no, it's actually thrown some curveballs my way.
Yeah, I've been challenged, but I wouldn't say it ever feels like... I'd say tough, but not unfair.
Yeah.
It's often, if I give something that's giving me trouble 1 or 2 tries, I'll start getting better until I eventually get the groove.
And part of that too is I'm also playing it a little like Banjo, and I have to remember at times, no, this is a bit different. The physics are just slightly tweaked, and you got to do this, and you can do that. And so once I get more familiar with Yooka-Laylee, obviously the easier it becomes. But there's some really like deviously designed pagey quest in this. So
I guess we'll get into this more when we talk about the cast of characters and the world and such, but I was trying to figure out like a way to sum up how I kind of feel about Yuka's gameplay and presentation, and in a weird way this is like a weird like comic book like Earth 2 version of Banjo-Kazooie.
A little bit, yeah. And granted, I mean, I was never a fan of Earth 2 being its own Earth. I'm a post-crisis kid, so I like the JSA, you know, in the past of the one singular continuity. So I like them being the first generation of heroes in World War II, before Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. Although Wonder Woman's mother can serve with them, that's fine. You can give me a wedgie if you want, Cameron. Put my head in the toilet, it's fine.
No, it's okay. I am watching the Flash TV show, and they are introducing the multiple Earths concept, so that's kind of a frame of reference for me.
Okay, all right. Well,
so we can just give each other wedgies and call it even.
How would that would be really hard to do, and
well, not at the same time.
No, at the same time, there needs to be a device that can give simultaneous wedgies. 'Cause I'm sure that's somebody's kink out there. You know? All right, let's get into it, because there's gonna be lots of sex jokes just in Yooka-Laylee alone that we're gonna be bringing up. So before we get into actually discussing World 1, we would be remiss if we did not discuss the characters. Now that we have a frame of reference for how the characters behave in this world, I want to go through the main cast, and I consider the main cast to be everybody that has an obvious analog with the Banjo-Kazooie cast. So, obviously, there's Yooka and Laylee. And I gotta be honest, Cameron. I'm loving Yooka-Laylee. I'm loving the characters. But Yooka and Laylee don't do a whole lot for me yet as protagonists. And I feel like they're not as fleshed out. I mean, Laylee is essentially just Kazooie in that she's a bit of a bitch. And Yuka is the do-gooder, kind of noble, but he's missing that like southern dimwit charm that Banjo has, that kind of inbred quality.
What I've kind of noticed, at least so far, is, at least in terms of differences between Yuka and Banjo, Banjo always kind of gave off this air of being kind of semi-lazy and reluctant to jump into the adventure. I mean, literally the beginning of the first game is him trying to sleep in.
Yeah.
Yuka doesn't kind of strike me as having that quality. It strikes me as a little bit more gung-ho, a little bit more of an everyman type about it.
I remember, Banjo-Tooie kind of introduced a little bit of darkness into Banjo, because there were some like comments and decisions he made in that game that were a little dubious, more so than the more morally upright character in Kazooie. But yeah, so far, Yuka is just kind of a blank slate. Ironic, being a chameleon. And Laylee is, bristling with personality, but it's essentially just completely lifted from Kazooie, which is fine. This is not an actual criticism of the game, because I knew this going into the game. I knew this was going to be the case, but after having spent time with so many of the characters, Yuka and Laylee are still kind of just there for me. And I enjoy playing with them. I enjoy watching them run around. My wife kind of busted out laughing when I was playing the game, and I asked what, and she just was laughing at their running animation, just because it's just like a little waddle. And
that is, I think, a really strong strength of Yuka and Laylee as characters. They're very solidly designed I'll just say they're very solidly designed video game characters.
Right.
Their designs communicate what they can do. They look good in the 3D space. And they're very simple shapes that work well.
I was kind of a little leery, honestly, about Yuka being a lizard, because I'm so used to mammals being essentially the protagonist of rare games. You got the primates in the Kong series, Honey Bear and Banjo. You've got a Squirrel and Conker. Fox in the star of the beloved Dinosaur Planet series. Come on. But a lizard, I've always been a mammal, and this is a little in-joke between me and my wife Michelle, but she always grew up because her brother was huge into reptiles. He raised them. He still does that to this day. And so whenever we're hiking together, she can always spot reptiles and amphibians and I'm just like, how are you seeing that? But then she won't be able to see a deer that's a few feet from us. So I can spot the mammals, she can spot the reptiles. So I'm more of a mammal fan. So I wasn't really like feeling the reptile thing. One thing actually playing this game has won me over, though, is the benefits for Yuka being a lizard and Laylee being a bat. Because they both eat butterflies. And I think butterflies are one of the most ingenious things that the team devised as far as how health and energy are regained.
This is also going to sound like a really silly thing to like latch onto and like, but I really enjoy the green and purple and the color scheme of this game because of these two.
Yeah,
I feel like it's pretty it's fairly uncommon, and it also kind of makes me think of the 90s a lot, because I seem to remember seeing those colors a lot more in the mid 90s.
Yeah, it strikes some sort of warm, nostalgic part of my brain too, but I can't quite place. Maybe it's just I'm thinking of Donatello, the Ninja Turtle, because he was my favorite, because he was the smart one, and I viewed myself as a smart kid until I got to junior high, and I realized I was only smart creatively, and I didn't know how to do complex mathematics. But Donatello is my favorite, and so I think the green and purple kind of comforts me a little bit. But yeah, they're great designs. The designs have really won me over. I wasn't really feeling like Laylee in particular originally, but she is definitely, I think, the red nose in particular. But Rare and the Donkey Kong universe, man, something about purple bats. They're big on purple bats. And but yeah, the butterflies. I love the butterfly munching mechanic. It's such a nice way of uncovering health, because if you're low on health, you can just go on a butterfly hunt. You know, you can sometimes get them from defeating the corplets, but otherwise, you know, you can just go out into the wilderness and you'll find them. And the tongue thing is great.
It was also really interesting to build basically two different collectibles in one that have a different effect depending on how you interact with them, which, to be honest, I still haven't gotten the hang of. I still find myself low on health and then running into the butterflies and only getting stamina back.
Yeah, I do that by mistake, but I've gotten better at it. The nice thing is the tongue can reach pretty far, so if you're within close proximity of the butterflies, you don't have to be right up next to them to
I'd say like within like a 360-degree bubble of them, you can kind of just go ahead and latch onto them without a problem.
I like Yooka too, because Yooka is essentially what if Yoshi, like the Yoshi from Super Mario World, was like, I realize, you know, Yoshi has his own series of games, but it is essentially Yooka is both the protagonist and the steed as well. So you've got, you know, his tongue abilities and his the powers he can get through the elemental berries or whatever they're called, and a little bit of Yoshi influence there, which is nice. But it's also, unlike the Yoshi series, you're not burdened by a screaming baby that you have to retrieve from a bubble.
It's funny you mentioned that, and I never even clued into it before, but I remember being a kid and like a 3D platformer with Yoshi was one of my like really hopeful things I was hoping Nintendo would try back in like the N64 days that didn't really pan out. But
Cameron, you got Yoshi on the top of the castle in Super Mario 64. Wasn't that enough? He gave you 100 lives and a sparkly double jump, and then he jumped off the castle. Wasn't that worth it?
I like that he didn't even proofread his own spelling.
He had a little bit to drink that day. He had to wait on the castle for a while. I mean, you can't begrudge the guy for taking the edge off. Anyway, yeah, Yooka-Laylee, like, okay, all my criticism of them apparently, and I didn't really even realize this until we started talking, my criticism of them are purely on the personality and characterization. I love them as playable characters, though. I just didn't even really pick up on that until I kind of started self-examining how I feel. Anyway, well, that's Yooka-Laylee, obviously the Banjo-Kazooie. Let's talk about the villain of the piece, Capital B. Now, you can compare him to Gruntilda in that he is the main bad guy, but
that's kind of where it ends.
That's kind of where it ends. He'll taunt you in Ivory Towers, but that's pretty much the only thing directly lifted so far. I don't know. Like, we haven't beaten the game. We haven't like gotten to the final boss fight. He might ride around on his vanity cane like a broomstick, but for now, he is wholly unique. Not just compared to Gruntilda, but compared to every other antagonist, primary villain of the shared Rare universe. And I was discussing this with our good friend Grunt, puppet master extraordinaire Grunt, and you know, he loves the villains of the Donkey Kong universe above all else. That is what he's into. He's made a puppet for nearly everyone, and he is loving Capital B because when you look at the villains of the Donkey Kong universe, you've got somebody like Gruntilda, who is a witch, a magic user. But then you've got just a stable of the lunatics. You've got K. Rool, who kind of started off just like big fat lizard, stock video game character. But he just slowly devolved into his own insanity. And he became a cackling madman, akin with the Joker. by the time of his last appearance. And you've got like Baron von Ghoul, who's just a weird dude with slightly creepy vibes, to say the least, with the whole child abducting aspect. You've got the Nazis of Conker's Bad Fur Day, the Panther King kind of, but he wasn't really the main villain of the piece, but he still kind of is, but he was just doddering fool. Capital B is just a greedy fuck. He is a capitalist. I mean, it's in his name, and he kind of, again, I'm gonna use the words post-crisis here. He is post-crisis Lex Luthor, the evil 80s businessman, which, considering the news and the political climate, it's kind of timely again. The Wall Street type, the Donald Trump, if you want to go there, he is a villain that is kind of suited for 2017, and I didn't think too much of it. Obviously, when Capital B was first introduced, we were all worried about, well, is there a Microsoft allegory there? Is that what they're going for? But in the context of the game itself, removed from the laborious backstory, I'm not getting that at all. He's just a stereotypical asshole boss.
And the funny thing is, and something I've come to kind of like about Capital B, and granted, we're not that far in the game.
Right.
These things may change later on. We might find out more about the character. But something I immediately latched onto that I think kind of separates him from the other villains we've been used to is that, well, say, Gruntilda and K. Rool, for the most part, when they're not like just doing this with the half-assed effort, they are out-and-out proud asshole villains.
Yeah.
Capital B at least kind of seems to be entertaining the facade that he's your buddy, that he has your best interests.
He's got his shit together. That's the cool thing about Capital B, which is weird to say. Compared to, again, the lunatics we have being the main villains in other games, he is just, he's got his wits about him still.
Like, the moment I zoomed in on, I think, was in the intro when they're unveiling his brand new statue, and below him is the vice president statue, and he wants to get rid of that, and the reason he gives for it is that it's going to affect the morale of my employees.
Yeah.
And that seemed like again, he's phrasing that not in... K. Rool or Gruntilda would have just said, I don't like that, get rid of it.
K. Rool would have just straight up murdered him if Donkey Kong 64 is any indication. Gruntilda would have too, let's be honest, because Gruntilda got quite murdery by the end of Banjo-Tooie, straight up off her own sisters. But yeah, so far Capital B is kind of a breath of fresh air, and you could say, yeah, he looks like Gru from Despicable Me, and nobody hates the minions more than I do, but actually seeing him animated, it's not as noticeable.
No, and there was one of the random lines he says around the layer that kind of got like a smile out of me, was like something like, that enemy you just killed, he was employee of the month last week.
Right.
Just giving off this air of, hey, shame on you.
I want to bring this up
here.
Yeah, I want to bring this up now because I don't know if I'm going to remember as we go on. But one thing that's really struck me with Yooka-Laylee's humor, and this is the thing I love about just the rare style of humor, but this is in particular, I think, Andy Robinson's doing, which, I'm sure he had some direction, but, Andy Robinson is the main writer for this. I love how you have this crazy cartoon world, but there's this element of the mundane layered into everything. Like these just shitty human attributes and the grind of our daily existences still exists in this world, this fantastical cartoon world. And just stuff like Capital B's corporate jargon that he will chime in with, and other things like characters like freaking out that Yooka and Laylee are solicitors, and that's why they're having none of their business.
I think I said something along these lines on Twitter about like why Banjo-Tooie is tonally one of my favorite games of all time. And I think the way I phrased it is it's a very whimsical fantasy world, but it's held together by this overarching sense of grounded real world crumminess.
Yeah. And again, this is the kind of why I'm a Rare fan, because I can actually buy into these realities, these weird cartoon realities. I can have the sense of disbelief that this archipelago does exist somewhere out there in the Atlantic Ocean. And my brain can perfectly rationalize it because they have to deal with this kind of stuff too, this ordinariness. And it's something
you
it's
can
something
have
that's
a
unique
giant
to Rare.
mountain. You can have a giant mountain carved in the shape of your head, but if you find out they're paying property taxes on it,
right. I love it. The fact that what was a planker is trying to like sell his rooftop as an apartment, and it's just like, what? Anyway, Capital B. I'm a fan of Capital B. You won me over with him, Platonic. Dr. Quack, I haven't really gotten too much of a taste for. I have him in my notes as the Klungo variant, just because he's the underling henchman that you kind of sense is kind of displeased with the situation. But so far, where I'm at, I don't know if there's. I mean, I guess way back when the Capital or Dr. Quack was going to become a turncoat by the end of the game, and I don't know if that's where it actually heads to, but I would say Dr. Quack is the Klungo in this situation.
So far, I'd have to say, and yeah, early on, you don't get too good of a read on Dr. Quack because he's kind of he's mostly reactionary at the moment.
Well, how far have you gotten, Cameron? Like, just
I've gotten far enough to see when Dr. Quack first interacts with Yooka-Laylee, but
why don't we leave it at that? I don't want to
saved for the next episode.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't want to get into that territory yet, but okay, that's where I'm at too. So,
what I would say what I would say about Dr. Quack is I think of all the mumbles we've heard so far, his is probably the most hilarious to me.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of like Donald Duck-esque like goose honk voice that he has.
I heard it. I knew Mamechi was going to be pleased with it. So, yeah. Trouser. Trouser is obviously the Bottles of this game, but he is nothing like Bottles. Bottles was even-tempered, patient. I mean, he would occasionally dish out an insult to Kazooie, but he took the brunt of that abuse in that relationship. Trouser is sleazy. He's kind of a little despicable. He is essentially a door-to-door salesman, and then some. He's kind of just the stereotypical kind of 50s interpretation of a door-to-door salesman mixed in with a used car salesman and some other, just kind of every kind of disreputable, pushy salesman you can think of. And,
like I'd say, like a character like say Stan from Monkey Island, a little bit, but even not quite on the same plane. They balance the salesman tropes really well with him. I think he's very fun to read, but you also know he's irritating the cast, and I think that's a good balance.
I like his Zach Morris phone too. That's, I mean, I know we knew that ahead of time, but just seeing how often he whips it out and takes a call in the middle of talking to you, it's just a great little animation, nice little touch there. He kind of a little bit reminds me of Saul Goodman from Breaking Bad, not the Better Call Saul, but or Jimmy McGill, but Saul Goodman as he exists in Breaking Bad.
It's also really, I didn't have a clue this would even be something in the pre-release, but that cell phone that he whips out, I've a couple times been able to find him because I could hear the audible cell phone beep.
Mm-hmm. It's a great little indication. A lot of the audio cues in this game do that, and it's a nice touch. Like you can hear a pagey even when you're like beneath it or at enough of a distance. You can basically hear a lot of the stationary characters make some sort of noise that tips you off, especially when they're kind of off the beaten path or require a little bit of exploration. So it's not something that was really utilized all that much in the Banjo games that I can recall. So it definitely adds a new element. But yeah, Trouser, he had a line, that where you first come up to him, but he's talking to his mom on his phone, and basically his mom's harassing him when he's going to come home to have tea with her. So I love that there's layers to Trouser, and we have another unseen character in the broader shared universe. I love unseen characters like Tip Top's father, of course, and now Trouser's mom can join.
I'm still holding out for K. Rool's wife. Come on, if you're not going to bring K. Rool back, Nintendo, at least make her a villain for
right,
one game.
Right. Now, I mean, the official word on that was that he was just lying, that he doesn't have a wife, but you can retcon something.
Well,
sure.
Yeah, but what's funnier?
Well, yeah, true. Anyway, Dr. Puzz is obviously the Mumbo. We already knew that, except instead of magic, she uses science. Really dodgy science, but sure, I guess whatever the molecules are supposed to be, some sort of a weird element that's undiscovered. I don't really know, but yeah, Dr. Puzz. Now, granted, I've only dealt with Dr. Puzz as of you, I think, in the first world, so I don't really haven't seen the full scope of what she can do. But yeah, it's fine. I like that you have to discover one item and it's hidden somewhere in the world rather than having to collect a bunch of tokens or
it's kind of like a consolidation of the Globos from Tui and the skulls from Kazooie.
Yeah, it feels more special, but it's also more streamlined, I guess. And it's like, oh, I found the molecule. Awesome. So...
And I guess it should be said, even though we were we were able to find very similar ground between the personalities of Yooka-Laylee and Banjo and Kazooie, Dr. Puzz is another character that, even though she fulfills the same role as Mumbo and Humba, does not read like either one of them. No.
Well, Mumbo is kind of a shady... Mumbo is more in common with Trouser in some ways than he does Dr. Puzz, and Humba... You just felt this sense of exasperation that just Mumbo was allowed to practice magic.
You do get this kind of vibe that I really like, which kind of makes me think back to Grunty's Revenge, where you deal with a Mumbo who isn't quite practiced as he is in later games, where there's this sort of, as you said, shady nature to her science, where. Like in her introduction, she says her transformation has only malfunctioned once, and it's fairly obvious that it was on her.
Right. Now, is she a human? Did she start off a human? Because I can't figure out what she's originally supposed to be.
That actually comes up in the digital manual.
Oh, I didn't see it.
You got as a backer. It's mentioned that... It's intentional that you can't tell whether she was originally an octopus or originally a human, because she's got elements that are fairly even split down the middle, and it's supposed to be ambiguous.
Kind of like Mumbo's true face, then.
So should we just split the difference and say she's a Jinjo?
She started off as a Jinjo. And also, an unnamed goldfish is in her bowl. Doesn't tap 3 times, but that's not a deal breaker. That's not a deal breaker, people. Royston hasn't always tapped 3 times in his myriad of cameos. So...
Who's to say who it is?
Who's to say? Obviously, Platonic can't say, but... Come on, Ed Bryan. We know what you're up to. Wink, wink. But the fanon part of my brain is kind of working overtime. Well, how did Royston end up with Dr. Puzz then? I know Royston's always trying to escape the hellish nightmare that is his existence, but how did he get into Dr. Puzz's bowl? That's gonna be have to save that for another time because I can't be bothered. You know, I rationalized how he got to Ghoulhaven, so I'm sure I can find a way.
In this situation, I feel a bit worse for Dr. Puzz than the goldfish in question because he's got to go to the bathroom at some point, right?
Plus, disaster follows Royson wherever he goes, so I would not want to be in close proximity to him. Finally, at least
I would like to apologize for making everyone think of goldfish poop on this episode.
Oh, really? I feel like that should be a recurring theme on the conversation. Is not just goldfish poop, but the fecal releases of all of the animal kingdom. Really. So Vendi is not quite as disturbing as we made her out to be in the still images of her. When you actually see her animated, she's still a little weird, but she kind of works. She is the Cheeto of the game, but much more robust Cheeto.
In more ways than one, I suppose.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you were kind of off-put by Vendi's official artwork, the character design comes off a lot better in-game because I think of the softer in-game lighting.
Yeah.
When we've seen her before, it's these 3D renders in a stark white void, and I think that means every little bit of metallic surface is kind of glaring full blast in those environments.
Now, granted, Platonic didn't help the situation with that one render of her tongue sticking out. But, yeah, Vendi... now, I have not used any of the tonics because I think there is something you get if you... Or maybe it's just an achievement you unlock if you never use Vendi throughout the entire adventure.
Oh, God damn it.
But I could be wrong, but I am not taking any chances yet. I'll play around with Vendi maybe at the end of the game. But
who am I kidding? I'm going to play this game more than once anyway.
Right. So, yeah, Vendi is the vending machine of Hybrid Towers, and there's a nice bit when you first talk to her where she tries to make sure you are... an employee, you know, that you're not just somebody trying to use the vending machines there. And I like that. I like that little bit of world building. And so in a lot of ways, Vendi is kind of working for Capital B, but she's nice enough that she gives you her tonics. Kind of like Cheeto was Gruntilda's spell book, you know. Except there's not that sense that Vendi is abused in any way either. So she's not necessarily a turncoat.
There's also this kind of sense that Yuka and Laylee are the ones in the wrong here, at least from her perspective, because her introduction kind of assumes her ignorance that you both are on the same side, as opposed to Cheeto, who kind of did go turncoat and went off on his own.
Right. Yeah, so while these are like one-to-one analogs as far as purposes in-game, with the exception of Yooka-Laylee, none of the characters really feel like cheap rip-offs. And not that Yooka-Laylee feel like cheap rip-offs, but the personalities are more carried over there than they are all these other characters. So, yeah. Real quick, Cameron, let's discuss the story. Because for whatever reason, the story I didn't really know too much about until I actually played the game. And the story is appropriately bonkers, as I alluded to on the Kongversation mini last Sunday. Do you want to have a go at describing this story?
Tell you what, let me... I would just read it from the digital manual, but I don't know if that's kosher, considering it was a Kickstarter reward or not. Yeah,
maybe let's not. I'm sure we can do a dramatic reading of it at some later point, but yeah, I just want to see if you can like just recite it in your own words, because it is...
I don't even know if I can.
Okay, so basically, Yuka and Laylee live in Shipwreck Creek, where what Laylee has coined the batship crazy has run aground for whatever reason. What is a pirate ship doing all the way up in the mountains? I don't know. Some people have speculated that maybe it's a flying ship, and that that's the twist. But I can't
it's
really
a story
say.
for another game.
Yeah. But in the batship crazy, Laylee found this mysterious book full of golden pages, and this is the one book, kind of. I think that's what they call it in the game. And Capital B, it knows all too well of this book, and he's trying to get his hands on it because he or she who gets their hands on this book can rewrite the laws of reality. And so it's very powerful.
He could
artifact.
just work at DK Vine if he wanted to save himself the trouble.
So, but because he doesn't know where the one book is, and from what I've seen, I progressed a little bit into the game, and I at least know how he's been tipped off to the existence of the one book. But I won't get into that. But because he doesn't know where the one book is, he just decides to suck up all of the books in the world through his giant kind of giant vacuum device. I don't know what you want to call it. And so at the beginning of the game, when you look up in Shipwreck Creek, you can see all these books getting sucked into Hivory Towers. It's a great visual that unfortunately isn't there when you go back out. I guess they knew they had the one book, so they stopped sucking them up. But the problem is, as the book was sucked up, all of the golden pages ripped themselves free, and they became the pages that you collect throughout the adventure. So it's kind of a race. You've got to collect the pages before Capital B can really get his hands on all of them. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a half-baked plot, but it's glorious in how stupid and weird it is. And when I say stupid, I mean that, again, in a very good way, because it does remind me a bit of Conker's Bad Fur Day, not just the level of mundane absurdity, but just in the absurdity.
And I think it's a really well managed kind of absurdity, because even though it is absurd that he went after a reality writing book and used a giant vacuum cleaner to suck up all these books, something I really like about it is that it does give the pages you're collecting a very central role in the story.
Yes.
And I know we're constantly going to be doing comparisons with Banjo. There's just no way around it throughout this. But the Jiggies in Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie are, I mean, let's just say they're plot coupons. They don't have a whole lot to do with the story itself.
No. Besides the original Jiggy you collect in Banjo-Kazooie, hi, Mr. Jiggy, you don't really, I mean, they're just items. And Banjo-Tooie introduces the Church of Jiggy Wiggy and Master Jiggy Wiggy, and you get some sort of backstory to the Jiggies, but it's still kind of not really there to drive the plot. Whereas here, the pages are important. They do constantly interact with you. They're all
that was pleasantly surprising. It
Yeah.
wasn't like the item collection in Banjo-Kazooie where the Mr. Jiggy speaks twice and that's about it. No, the pages keep talking to you regularly throughout the game.
and they can actually provide you clues about how to get them, or just yeah, it's good. And I like that a lot of the pages are in cages, and they're actually called cages. And so that part of the Yooka-Laylee rap is therefore justified. It sounded a lot lamer when we first heard it, but after actually playing the game, oh yeah, pages and cages. Okay. It's certainly a lot more relevant than pineapple smells, as Matt pointed out.
There's also a very funny conversation in the first world that's kind of pointing out that in all logic, they should just be able to turn sideways and come out of the cages.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, and the Pagey just shoots it down, and that's the end of that. Okay. So anyway, yeah, the story's nice, and there's also the grand tomes. It's a nice mechanic for the worlds themselves, because one of the issues of the original Banjo-Kazooie was you never really knew where these worlds took place. It was pretty clear they were separate realms connected to Grundy's lair, but it was never really dealt with. And here it just ties into the whole books, and you've got ghostwriters, and you've got quills, and everything feels thematically connected with this whole notion of literature, which, again, it didn't really make that much sense ahead of time, but playing the game, okay, I get it, it's fine. Definitely makes more sense than puzzle pieces and music notes and all of these disparate elements, Jinjos, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I'll never not love that stuff, but Yuka definitely put a lot more thought into it.
I'm certainly going to be very interested to find out if there's any sort of indication that the worlds of the tomes exist on the same plane as Shipwreck Creek and Ivory Towers. Because in Kazooie, it's kind of ambiguous if the worlds beyond the entrances in Grunty's lair are, if they exist in a physical space somewhere, or if they're just kind of extensions of her lair. Mm-hmm. Banjo-Tooie kind of establishes there's this massive landmass that every character is free to move to and fro and around.
Right, which I love. I mean, I prefer the 2E way of going about it, but I think Yooka-Laylee comes up with an excellent compromise. And for my interpretation at this point in time is the tomes are their own separate realm. Now, the ghostwriters, I assume, all wrote the tomes, so maybe they do exist within a shared universe, or maybe the only way to access them is to go back out through Ivory Towers and then into the next tome, so I don't know, like, as far as like the in-universe logistics behind it, so
I'm just going to come out and say it. I want to know because I want to draw it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's talk about Shipwreck Creek really quick, and then we got to get to Tribalstack Tropics, but I have to bring up Shipwreck Creek. I love Shipwreck Creek. By the way, we're not going to be talking about Ivory Towers all that much. I think we'll save Ivory Towers for the final episode in this Yooka-Laylee discussion series, just so we can get the broader sense of what Ivory Towers is. But Shipwreck Creek is the Spiral Mountain analog of the game, and it's just a nice, gorgeous location, and I obviously love it because it just feels like a melting pot of rareness. You've got a pirate ship, you've got tons of barrels everywhere, you've got what might be subtle nods to Mr. Pants in both Yuka's pants that he's flying on the mast, and also the book he's reading about why you should wear pants. So
I think that was it shows again what I look for in these games. That one of the very first things I tried to do booting up this was try and hunt for all the little in-jokes on the textures of the objects around Yuka and Laylee.
Reading the paint cans.
Like, I think you did the same exact thing, trying to position, reading the paint can, trying to position the camera around the paint can.
Yeah.
Which, it says it's got a very extensive warning label of what not to do with it. Do not drink, do not use for tattoos, do not apply to butt.
Right, right. And I love it's such a piss take to multicolored paint. It's just
just so all the different colors that you could use. Obviously, Laylee obviously used on the ship don't need separate paint cans. This is just every color paint.
Right. I love how I guess this is a benefit of just doing this in Unity, but I love how every object that isn't bolted down can be interacted with in manipulated. It can be kicked. It can be shoved. Just by the characters running into it. So I kept knocking the paint cans over when I was trying to get a closer look at them. So
this is one of those like shades of nuts and bolts that does come through in this game.
Yeah,
you see it in little bits and pieces. And this is one of them. And it's something I liked in nuts and bolts, is that you could knock around pretty much every object that wasn't either figuratively or literally bolted to the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shipwreck Creek. So it's up in the mountains, but it's just this like nice, pleasant mountain meadow, I guess, with this mysterious pirate shipwreck on there, which seems to be driving a lot of the larger lore of the Platonic series. I don't like. I mean, a Platonic shared universe. Obviously, we're including the Platonic shared universe in the larger rare universe, what we call the Donkey Kong universe, just to be extra confusing. But when I say Platonic shared universe, I'm not excluding the rest of the broader rare shared universe. I'm just being more specific as to it relates to Platonic.
I'd say it's maybe like a bat family within the DC universe. A literal bat, literal bat family.
Right. So you've got this mountain meadow, and you've got the peaks in distance, and it's very, very pleasant. I love how you can get a sense of Yooka-Laylee's domestic life. I want to know how Yooka-Laylee became friends with Banjo and Kazooie. It was never established, but because Banjo appeared sans Kazooie in Diddy Kong Racing, you just kind of got the sense that he found the egg and hatched her, and essentially that's how they became buddies. But I know the action figure on the Diddy Kong Racing Banjo figure said something bizarre about Banjo being adopted into the Kazoo family, but I think that was just whoever was the typist for Toy Biz not giving a shit. And it's like, what was the name of that game? Banjo-Kazooie? All right. There is no Dana. There is only Kazooie.
I remember as a kid, I was hurting for a Kazooie toy to go along with him so much that I actually made a paper Kazooie head and wings to tape to his backpack.
We almost got a Banjo-Kazooie figure proper from Toy Site. It was
the
ones
guys
who
who
did that Donkey Kong series. Yeah, but that never came.
In the World of Nintendo series, we'll add.
Right. Oh, what was it called? World of Nintendo? Yeah, it was. Something like that. I get it confused with the current Jack specific line, but we're obviously not getting a Banjo-Kazooie through that. So anyway, there is the character of Blasto and his, let's just say, Reigle friend in Shipwreck Creek was the canon of the Batship Crazy. And I like Blasto. You have to help Blasto out. You can't help him out at first. You have to go back to Shipwreck Creek after you learn the ground pound maneuver, and you get a Pagey from him. And I have to admit, Cameron, I did not understand the joke Laylee made after you got the Pagey out of him. Something about if there's like some alliterative joke about you've got to watch out for Dirty Dan something or other, and I don't get it.
I assumed because of the nature of how you get the Pagey out of him that it was like a joke about him vomiting, and it probably had something to do with like a drinking or eating establishment. Tell you what, all we have to do is be super, super ignorant about this, and somebody on the forums or on Facebook will come to us with an explanation for the next episode.
And they will rake us over the coals. How did you not know this? How do you not? I know more about Yooka-Laylee than you do, Kongversation. You're frauds. You're all frauds.
I'm disappointed I didn't immediately reach for a smartphone after reading the line, though, which I should have done.
Fake Platonic fans. Anyway, I should look it up, but I'm also avoiding spoilers as much as I can. And it's already frustrating to me because when I'm on YouTube, YouTube will be recommending all of these like ukulele walkthroughs, and I'll see like brief thumbnails, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to. No.
Oh, I learned the hard way when I was developing those avatars for the forum that the Yooka-Laylee wiki was updating as soon as people got their review copies.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So I'm basically going into lockdown. I'm sure the game will be spoiled for me before I'm done playing it, but I'm trying to go as long as humanly possible. I need to also note, since we are being truthful of any problems we encounter, it was in Shipwreck Creek that this is the only time the camera completely shat out on me. I don't know if this ever happened to you, Cameron, but it completely locked up on me for some reason. I could not manipulate the camera whatsoever until I exited the game. Actually, what I did is I went back into Ivory Towers, and that fixed the camera for me. But I couldn't move the camera, and I went back out to get another pagey after I learned a move, and I couldn't manipulate the camera whatsoever. So I don't know if this is just a bug that pops up every now and then. I should be pointing out I am playing the Xbox One version. Which version are you playing?
The Xbox One version as well.
Yeah. No, you're playing the Switch version. You got a really early copy. So I don't know if this is a reoccurring problem, if this is something critics have found. It wasn't a deal breaker. I was just like, oh, something's locked up.
I haven't had the camera like in a very like obviously glitchy way mess with me. There was one instance in Shipwreck Creek where the camera becomes fixed at one point due to a platforming scenario. And at that point in the game, I kind of hadn't realized that, yeah, there are moments in the game where the camera will back up with the intent of giving you a clear perspective on what you're doing.
The only reason I know that is the toy box, because the toy box did that, and it confused me in the toy box at first.
Right, and it was one of those things, again, this is... I'm sure somebody could write an entire review paragraph about this. I just kind of shrugged and moved on. That, okay, well, I know to expect this occasionally from now on.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's when it happened to me. Maybe it was with a fixed camera, but the camera never unfixed itself.
That's what I would assume happened. Like, there was maybe some kind of script that just triggered the camera being fixed at the position you were, and nothing untriggered that script.
Clearly,
look at me pretending I know anything about programming.
Clearly, Yooka-Laylee is nostalgia gone wrong. So, okay, where does Shipwreck Creek... Okay, we're going to be really putting on our nerd hats here, so please bear with us. If anybody from Playtonic is listening, I'm sorry. This is not something you ever have to address. This is just our own petty little fan shit. Where does Shipwreck Creek / Ivory Towers exist in the Rare Archipelago? Now, for one thing, what should we call this landmass? Because for our sake, I think we have to assume it's an island. But we can't assume that it's called Shipwreck Creek, because that seems to refer to a very, very specific spot on this landmass.
Yeah, it's like how Spiral Mountain is on the Isle of Hags.
Or the Northern Hemisphere, depending on which argument you want to have. But for your sake, yeah. you the cartographer, Cameron, I will say Isle of Hags tonight.
Yes, the Northern Hemisphere, which is apparently the nearest southernmost island to DK Island.
We can ignore the Donkey Kong Country 3 instruction manual because the Rareware site said differently. So anyway... We can't call it Shipwreck Creek, and we can't really call it Ivory Towers either. For my own sense of peace of mind, for now, I'm just calling it Platonic Island. That's just a shitty, placeholder name until we get something more concrete or some other idea. Because I'm assuming, hopefully, maybe future Platonic games will also be set here. And I think it's only fair, since Platonic's doing their own shared universe thing, but there are connections to the broader Rare shared universe, we got to give them their own little corner of the Rare Archipelago. So I'm assuming this takes place far to, let's say, the east of the rest of the islands. Not too far where you can't have interactions if you want, but not so that they're directly neighbors with, say, the Isle of Hags.
I think the way you phrased this to me was it would be about the same distance from the Isle of Hags that, say, the Jungle Beat Island theoretically is from DK Island.
Faraway lands, yeah. Because the faraway lands are determined because there are Arctic penguins in the faraway lands. And they do travel to the southernmost continents that aren't Antarctica. So I believe the penguins go as far as South Africa. So I said that it is southernmost island in the rare archipelago, the faraway lands, and relatively adjacent to South Africa, where that would be. So for me, I would say this is kind of, the climate seems to be similar to, say, your Timber Islands, your Isle of Hags, kind of. So yeah, maybe the latitude is the same, or latitude, longitude, yeah. But
and I mean, granted, this is all speculation from the early game. I mean, the very final shot of the game could be a pullout to reveal this all takes place in Burbank or something.
It could take place within a snow globe that an autistic child is just imagining the whole game. St. Elsewhere.
So is Richard Belzar going to be one of the guest characters later on?
You know what? It's a damn shame we haven't gotten Munch in the Shared Rare universe yet. We got Shovel Knight, but we can't get fucking Munch? Munch has appeared in everything. All right. Anyway. Yeah. So for me, I mean, is that okay with you, Cameron? For now, let's just refer to it as Platonic Island until we have more concrete information.
Yeah. Let's go with that, and then maybe as we go, somebody will give us a less shit name out of sheer pity.
And maybe it's actually further in the game, and we just don't know. But don't spoil it for us if it is, or if it isn't. I don't want to know either way. I remember when I played these games as a kid, I remember, even though the Diddy Kong Racing Instruction Manual was pretty clear that Conker was not from Timbers Island, I knew, I didn't know where 12 Tales Conker 64 was going to take place, so I just assumed, well, that's going to be on Timbers Island. Conker can be from Timbers Island. And it wasn't until, I think, Bad Fur Day that it finally, I finally retired that idea whatsoever. So I'm flexible. I mean, I just, with the absence of information right now, we've got to slot it in so I can have some comfort of my hyper obsessive fan brain. So it's fine. All right, Tribalstack Tropics. Whew. Let's talk about this. And I want to compare it a little bit, first of all, to the similar first worlds in other rare 3D platformers. It is kind of amusing to me that so far, if we're going to say Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Tooie, and Yooka-Laylee are the main four. I'm not including Conker's Bad Fur Day because that was a 3D platformer, but it was a different kind of breed. It was kind of its own thing. So let's say these four. Out of these four, the first world is always a tropical or subtropical world with ruins and monuments, and it's funny how that works. We had Mumbo's Mountain, Jungle Japes, Mayhem Temple, and now Tribalstack Tropics.
Even Nuts and Bolts kind of trod on this a little bit because that was a tropical area, Nutty Acres.
But those were domes, though. I mean, it's like Biodome with Pauly Shore. I guess, but it's not really nature, you know. Of course, this is a book, so who's the fuck to say, you know, what really
None
counts.
of these games really happened.
Yes, they did, Cameron. You will not deprive me of the fantasy. Tribalstack Tropics is kind of, I mean, we've discussed this on the Kongversation just from what we've seen. The nice thing about the whole storybook aesthetic or philosophy behind the design of the worlds is they can be a little bit more whimsical than Rare games usually would allot for themselves. In this case, you've got the kind of Avatar-style floating islands in the sky, which, that's all Tribalstack Tropics is. It takes place on a series of floating islands, some larger than others, but it reminds me of Pandora.
I wasn't sure how to feel about that at first because I thought it was a curious choice to, like, I'll give the example again. Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie's starting levels, to kind of ease the player in, didn't have any bottomless pits whatsoever.
Yeah. At least you don't have lives in this game. It does is just reset you to the last point you entered. So.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to get at. I was thinking to myself, gee, this seems like kind of an odd difficulty spike to put on the player right at the start, but then you realize, like, if you do misstep and fall off this island, or just do it deliberately because you like to watch your characters fall, death is very much in the Banjo-Tooie vein of being a slap on the wrist in this game.
Or Donkey Kong 64, it doesn't really matter. And it doesn't matter. Like, the quills don't reset or anything. It's just, whatever. You just got to go back to the point. It can be mildly inconveniencing, but that's about it. And maybe there's some sort of achievement you get for never dying. I don't know. Too late for me because I fell down a pit. Today was the first day I accidentally fell down a pit. I was doing so well, but I was exploring in some of the expanded higher areas, and yep, I slipped.
I'm curious, how long did it take before you did what I did and pretty much every Banjo-Tooie player I know on DK Vine did, which was find a really, really tall spot and jump off, just to see how much fall damage it would cause?
After I fell down a pit, that's the first thing I did, because once the anxiety of letting that happen was past, I was like, all right, let's watch these fuckers fall. So
it was something I was legitimately afraid they wouldn't have in this game, because I did fall from like a reasonably high height at the beginning of the game and nothing seemed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of shocked me, but I think it turns out that the fall damage is just slightly more lenient than it was in the Banjo games, and I think that may have something to do with the fact that, at least from what we've seen of Tribalstack Tropics, there's a lot more utilization of vertical space in this game.
What Platonic actually did was they captured a lizard and a bat, and they chucked them from a tall mountain, and then they studied the actual fall damage that they took and incorporated that into the game. It was very scientific, and they only went through 7 lizards, so bully for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a large vertical not even spiral. I mean, it just goes on and on, especially when you expand it. I want to talk about the whole expanding notion here, but I want to bring this up because this, in the whole exploring and climbing aspect of Tribalstack Tropics, and I don't know if this is the case in later worlds, but was it weird to you as a veteran of the Rare 3D platformer that essentially any surface could be used as a platform so long as it was level enough?
Yeah, that was really throwing me for a loop, because I'm so used to the idea of, if it looks pretty but it's in a out-of-the-way place, it probably has some kind of invisible wall or collision to keep you from going there.
Mm-hmm.
No, pretty much everything that you think you can reach in this game from looking at it, you can reach it, and often the game will hide the quills in those areas.
Oh, they'll hide a lot of stuff in those areas. But I don't know, because I'm not a developer. I'm a hack writer, and I don't know if this is just, the benefit of developing in Unity, but I just felt like everything was a lot more interactive, and yeah, I felt like you could kind of not break the game, but you can definitely go about getting to different areas in a myriad of ways now, so long as your character can get the leverage up a particular area.
like it just felt like I was breaking some kind of rule
Yes,
with some
yes.
of the platforming I was doing, like just like clipping onto random rocks hanging out of like a fairly smooth vertical wall.
And this, before I expanded the world, I was kind of at a loss for not finding anything. And so I was like going off the beaten path and exploring quite a bit. But and you know, the game to its benefit, you know, pretty much lets you. And I never really got into any situation where I was stuck. I could always climb my way back, which was appreciated. I don't know, and I'm sure there are areas where if you fall and you like land on an outcropping, you might be stuck, but I haven't encountered it yet.
Yeah, any situation like that I've been able to get myself out of.
Yeah, which again is surprising because I was like, oh, I'm stuck here. I'm gonna have to kill myself, and then I was like, well, I'll just give it a shot. And I was like, oh, I got back. Wow.
And going in with that whole, like, again, you can kind of climb anywhere and go anywhere you see. I think they used this sort of idea of vertical real estate in the level to expand Tribalstack Tropics in a different way than, say, Mayhem Temple was an expansive level, because Tribalstack Tropics does feel like a really huge first world, but it never feels overwhelmingly so. Like, I never felt like I missed the warp pads from Banjo-Tooie in this level.
No, and the way, you know, I've commented how Tribalstack Tropics, not on the show, but in things like the Inner Circle and just talking with friends, I've talked about how the layout Tribalstack Tropic is sprawling, but it's actually very economically designed. And once you kind of get your bearings, it all makes sense. You've just got to utilize the riverbed, essentially. And that is the easiest way to circumnavigate the world. And especially when you expand it. I think Tribalstack Tropics, honestly, I prefer it vastly over Mayhem Temple, which the funny thing about Banjo-Tooie is it's a game that I have grown to appreciate more and more with time. I used to be of the mindset that Banjo-Kazooie was a masterpiece and Banjo-Tooie was flawed in some sense. It was overly ambitious and it kind of ruined the formula. It's only in recent years that I've discovered, you know, Banjo-Tooie is a masterpiece in its own right, and in a lot of ways it is the better game, but it's lacking the kind of simplicity of Kazooie, the elegant simplicity of Kazooie. But I think also the biggest hurdle I had with Tooie was Tooie takes a while, in my opinion, to really get going as far as being an engaging game. And I think the problem is the first two worlds are kind of two of the worst worlds in the game. I don't really care that much for Mayhem Temple and Glitter Gulch Mine.
I'd say they're not so much Mayhem Temple for me, but definitely Glitter Gulch Mine, is that for early levels, they're a little bit difficult to find your bearings.
They're difficult to find their bearings, and they're just kind of dark and overly moody, and there's just not a lot to really lift you up. I mean, Banjo-Tooie begins with your friend Bottles getting murdered, and it just goes from there. This new character you meet, King Jingling, gets turned into a zombie. A Jinjo family you see has been bulldozed senselessly. It's a dark game, and the first two worlds don't really add too much in the way of bright and cheery decor. So
I like that Rare introduced an entire breed of Jinjo just to have it in the backstory that they were accidentally slaughtered.
But then at Grunny's Revenge, they are one of the Jinjo colors you can collect. So you do see them some 20 years before their death.
Geez, Banjo, you think you could have warned them?
Whatever happened.
Hey, on a cold rainy night in the year 2000, you might want to go on vacation for a few days. Just a heads up.
Right around the time that America has their issues with hanging chads, that might be about the time you want to start thinking about Maybe visiting Timbers Island, seeing those go-kart tracks. So, anyway, back to Tribalstack Tropics. I prefer Tribalstack Tropics over Mayhem Temple, over Jungle Japes, because despite being a floating Pandora wacky land, Tribalstack Tropics feels more like a real jungle than Jungle Japes ever did.
I think something that it kind of helps with Tribalstack Tropics is there's not a lot of... There's like maybe less than a handful of interior areas in the level. Yeah. Almost always, if you lose your bearings, you can turn the camera around and just, I've seen that before. I know where I am. But
God, I gotta say, I miss those long, dark corridors with the swinging lights. I miss them. Gotta bring them back, Platonic. In fact, just have a whole game set in a Donkey Kong 64 corridor. I mean, the Metroid fans would probably love it, right? Should have been Metroid. It's and while this lacks the simplicity of Mumbo's Mountain, it's far meatier than Mumbo's Mountain. I honestly like Mumbo's Mountain is probably like my favorite of these first worlds, but Tribalstack Tropics, it's far more interesting, and I think it might be in contention for my second favorite. And granted, it's a lot newer, but Mumbo's Mountain is basically simple. You can like breeze through Mumbo's Mountain even when you first get the game. Tribalstack Tropics will give you a workout.
Mumbo's Mountain is a very elegantly crafted tutorial.
After the main tutorial in Spiral Mountain, right?
And I mean that in the best possible way. I think with Tribalstack Tropics, there's a little bit more of an expectation that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah, this game doesn't hold your hand so much. It's basically made for veterans of Banjo and maybe Donkey Kong 64. And because of that, I could see the critics who were never really big into 3D platforming, say for maybe Super Mario 64, and maybe they rented Banjo for a weekend. They're having more of a time with this than the faithful are. But who's to say? I'm sure every critic is different. What were your thoughts, Cameron, on the expansion mechanic? Because this was a bit of a letdown for me, at least in Tribalstack. I haven't seen yet how the later worlds are going to utilize it, but I was under the impression that the expansion mechanic would like it would be expanding it, but not in so many vital elements. I was exploring this world before I expanded it, and I could not for the life of me figure out why there were so many dead ends, or why. It was only until I talked to Clara, the skeleton girl in the pot, that she said, after the world is expanded, go up this path. And I was like, so this path up here, there'll be more to it then. But I was looking for the boss Rampo. I was like going up his temple, and I was like, where's Rampo? How do I get to Rampo?
That, I admit, was kind of a weird thing that happened with me in the game, because the very first thing, well, maybe not the very first thing I did, when I got into the world, I think I went for the Ghost Rider who was underneath the level entrance first.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things I did when I got out into the greater area of Tribalstack Tropics was climbing the area that would eventually become Rampo's quarters.
So you went right for the flaming jets. That's impressive.
Yeah, and you kind of don't find out until it's way too late that there's nothing to do up there.
Well, it frustrated me because I couldn't even get those quills on the very top, and I was just like, what am I missing? I can't climb up there. So, yeah, I didn't really foresee that the expansion was just literally going to be, we're withholding the bulk of this world from you until you like put more pages in there. And granted, maybe it'll be different in other worlds, and maybe it won't, but at least the impression Tribalstack Tropics gave me was, you pretty much want to expand the world right away because you're just going to be reaching a lot of dead ends otherwise.
Yeah, I think when I first heard about the mechanic, I was thinking of something more along the lines of, say, how Click Clock would work in Banjo-Kazooie, where it would be sort of like a more organic progression.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Like, say, how you slowly have the treehouse being built in that level.
Right.
But yeah, I'm curious how you plan to play out the rest of the game, because I think I've stockpiled enough pages in the first world before I move on that I'll probably have the option to expand right away for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm hoping I will too.
Do you think you'll still give each world a spin without expanding it first, or will you just mash the button?
No, because I will want to see what the worlds look like before the expansion, just so I can get a taste of both. That is the completionist in me. But I really wish Playtonic would have done the totals differently pre-expansion, because I don't like not knowing how many items I can collect pre-expansion. There's nothing to indicate, okay, I pretty much maxed out what I can do, I've got to expand. For the linear completionist, that is a bit cumbersome. And
granted,
really
that was
but
also kind of present in Banjo-Tooie, but I think you were able to kind of parcel it out better because of, and again, this is one of those things that's a benefit in some ways, a detriment in others, the very much more open nature of the world. In Banjo-Tooie, I think I could kind of mentally separate, oh, well, I can't go to Dilberta's jail cell yet and do anything.
Right.
In that area, but I can go in this other area that I have to go through a loading zone for and do stuff there.
Yeah, and you just kind of had to let go in Tooie. You know, you kind of had to just accept that's the game it was going to be, and kind of marvel at the fact that all the areas were interconnected like that.
And now, granted, there are still areas that do have that quality in Tribalstack, like the inside of the temple that I went into. Like, very clearly, I need another move before I can make any more progress in there. I mean, yeah, full disclosure again, I have not 100% at this level, nor do I think I could at this time with how much I have open.
Oh yeah, I clearly don't have all the moves I need. Now maybe there's something I'm missing, but I've gotten, the bulk of everything in this world. There are just some I'm missing, so I feel comfortable enough that I can talk about it. But I think I've basically seen everything there is to see. I just can't really get all the pages yet. Well, let's talk a little bit. So, real quick though, the expansion mechanic, a bit disappointing, and I didn't really get Tribalstack in full until I expanded it, and then everything started clicking, and I could really marvel at the design. But it really just feels like they're withholding it from you until you expand it, and it's a bit weird and a bit frustrating too when you don't know what it is you can and cannot do, or can and cannot find, until you just go in and expand it.
I think there's like a cheeky DLC joke to be made here, and I'm wondering if it's going to come up later.
I'm sure, because Laylee does make a lot of modern references to gaming culture, which you would expect, but I'm so used to Lee Loveday's writing that it's funny to see like such stark like references to like cloud-based gaming and stuff like that. It's super obvious puns whenever they're utilized, but it is a bit jarring, especially when I'm playing this game and I just kind of fall back into that mindset of, it's 1998, isn't it?
Speaking of modern games, should we move on to
Yes. The Kongversation's favorite character, the name's so nice we've only gotten it right twice. Rextro. So a lot of reviewers apparently don't like Rextro, and I don't know why. I think he's fine. I love him as a character, honestly, and the first arcade game in Tribalstack Tropics, the Cartos Racing, it's pretty fun. It's a fun little diversion. Right? Am I missing something? Is there some sort of grievous besmirchment to the good taste that is gaming journalism.
I didn't find Rextro's minigame any more, like, out of place than, say, the minigames in Tui.
Right.
And I know that, like, again, I had been in communities with people who were able to get more of a head start on the game than I did, just by virtue of having more free time. And I'd seen the recurring complaint, like, oh, Rextro's first minigame is so terrible. It's like RC Pro-Am, and, you know, all that entails. And when I played it, I know RC Pro-Am. This is not RC Pro-Am.
No, there's basic similarities, but this
is a whole lot more intuitive than RC Pro-Am has aged itself into.
I got better at RC Pro-Am though, playing it on Rare Replay. I have to admit. I used to play that when I was a kid with Elliot, RC Pro-Am, and it was only playable for me with a Game Genie, and it's now slightly easier to control and a lot more fun thanks to Replay.
I didn't have RC Pro-Am when I was younger, but I did have Mickey's Racing Adventure on the Game Boy Color, which is basically the exact same principles. It's like I think I've always said it's like the RC Pro-Am. It's to what RC Pro-Am what Diddy Kong Racing is to Mario Kart 64.
Which is funny because Diddy Kong Racing started life as RC Pro-Am 64. Anyway, yeah, I didn't have a problem with Cartos racing, and it does get frustrating at times. I'm always hitting the bees. I can never like time it just right so I can like destroy them with the firing mechanic.
Yeah, I kept forgetting the firing mechanic was a thing and just kept trying to drive around stuff.
I have gotten good at driving around the reverse controls. I was hitting them quite a bit when I first started out, but
and I think if I remember right, I was able to complete it on the first try both times. And
good for you. Good for Cameron. Look at Cameron Reigle, the expert gamer over here.
I don't try to say that as like some kind of humble brag, because I do kind of hate it online when you see somebody like posting on a forum or on social media just, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with this one part of the game, and it's really frustrating, and all of the replies are just, oh, that's easy, you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
But just, I guess what I'm trying to get at with that comment is I didn't spend enough time with it to the point where I was frustrated.
The only thing I would have changed with it is I wish there was a retry button on the option screen, so you don't have to exit completely, talk to Rextro, and restart it. Like, I wish you could just skip over that, because it is a little when you know you fucked it up, you just want to quickly get back into the game, and you don't want to go through the whole thing again.
But we mentioned like reviewers have a problem with Rextro's games, but can we talk about Rextro the character? Because I've maybe had like 3 conversations with this guy, and I already love the hell out of him.
Yeah, he's brimming with personality, and I mean, he's definitely, and he's a design that, again, he was off-putting a little bit when we saw his design, because it was a very obvious Mark Stevenson kind of design, juxtaposed with all these Steve Mails designs and the Ed Bryan designs, and you've got Dean Wilson. It's just so many artists contributing to this game. And but it kind of all works when you see them living and breathing in the game world with similar lighting, as you said. And Rextro definitely. His whole purpose is he's supposed to look off because he's a polygonal character from the 64-bit era. But even like his weird DKC3 Kremlin-esque design, just seems to work in game.
Yeah, and I think how I would sum up Rextro's personality, which is kind of what endeared him to me, is he's relentlessly happy, even though every bit of dialogue in and out of his mouth and from the other characters around him is about kind of how messed up his lot in life has become because he's this outmoded character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the humor a little, in some ways, kind of reminds me of the humor during the entirety of Nuts and Bolts, where it was just, oh, this is going to be our last game, isn't it? This is the end of the road. Oh,
but what
nobody
makes
cares
it
about
is
3D
he's
platforming
just
anymore.
relentlessly chipper about it the
Yes.
entire time. There is
He
no
defies
irony.
cynicism.
There's no irony in anything he says.
Yeah.
And there was even a good bit. Well, actually, you know what? I'll save it. That's from a later part of the game. But
Okay.
It's just this nice juxtaposition, and I like seeing him and Laylee interact
Mm-hmm.
because you've got this relentlessly biting, sarcastic force against this character who's just either out of sheer obliviousness or his own upbeat personality, just having none of it.
Yeah, he's kind of got this big, like, goofy grin on his face the whole time, and he's just, yeah. I really do like Rextro, and one of these days I will learn how to say his full name. The Knights of Hamelot. This was basically a quest. You had to find the 4 different pigs, and by doing so, you will unlock a Pagey and a KG in Rampo's treasure hoard. Now, I found Rampo's treasure hoard before I talked to the first pig, so I was just like, "Oh, okay. There's something tied to this."
Oh,
and
so
then,
did I.
Yeah.
Wait, well, I think I found Scoffs a lot, and then I found the treasure chamber, and it was kind of throwing me a little bit because most times when you find a Pagey and a KG, just abruptly with no explanation, you'll get a bit of dialogue from that Pagey telling you what needs to be done or some kind of environmental clue around them. That really doesn't happen here with Rampo's treasure room.
See, I just assumed that would be the Pagey you got when you beat Rampo. But then I discovered it was part of the scavenger hunt of finding all of the Knights of Hamelot, which doesn't make a lot of sense when you really examine it, because if they all split up, then how would they know where the last pig was? Because clearly the third pig knew where the treasure hoard was if he knew where the fourth pig was. So why are they all still split up? Well, maybe I'm just overanalyzing it. Maybe I can just fan-wank that away. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm assuming the Knights of Hamelot will probably play into a later world, but because they don't really like fit within Tribalstack Tropics. So I am looking forward to seeing that. But yeah, they were just kind of there. They didn't do a whole lot for me. If there is a medieval kind of world, I will be, I think, much more receptive towards those characters in their natural habitat.
Yeah, these guys kind of strike me like they might end up like how Gobi was, where you think he's only going to be useful for one thing, and then he just keeps cropping up everywhere.
Yeah, and what is it, too, about anthropomorphic pigs and this shared universe, Cameron? It doesn't matter if it's rare, if it's platonic, if it's retro, we will get anthropomorphic pigs. It's nice. It adds that nice consistency. Maybe these are relatives of the oinks and crispy bacon and the mutated pig in Jolly Roger's lagoon. So, whatever. Let's talk about those plants that you have to pollinate, because
these are some lecherous little plants.
They're lecherous, and you basically ejaculate all over them. And the game doesn't really mince words about it. If you try to pollinate some of the plants outside of this main area, they'll basically say it's way too early for that, which I guess could be taken different ways, but I always implied, because those plants are quite lecherous towards you as well, so I always implied that, whoa, you're really rushing our relationship here since you're coming in my face. But that's just my take. But that's essentially the take. I mean, am I missing something? this is straight up filth in the best way.
I mean, you're kind of already at that context when you consider what pollinating meant in Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Right. And that is just disgusting when you become the plant form of Yooka-Laylee, which again, I love that both Yooka and Laylee form the plant. It's not just like in Banjo-Kazooie where Kazooie just presumably stayed in the backpack because it would look weird, and Banjo's body was the crux of the transformation. But
it's also a nice balance between like silly and horrifying.
Yes, which the DN Ray, I think that they want to get that across. It's body horror, essentially. That's what Dr. Puzz represents. It's a Jeff Goldblum Cronenberg movie. But it's just really vile then to see this substance spraying out of Plant Yuka's mouth. It's just... And I started like hosing down other characters with it. I would go up to Vendy and just spray her down. Does that really say something about me?
I think you need Nick on the show for this.
Okay, fair enough. Nick, I know you're listening. Next time you're on a show, we'll talk about hosing down Bendy together. But yeah, these were some pretty damn lecherous plants. You're right. And they based. I mean, there was a straight up line of dialogue. I took screenshots of all of this dialogue, by the way, because I just couldn't believe it. But you can fondle my petals. Like this was Conker dialogue.
Did the same thing, like just the word fondle. You don't even need any other
right innuendos. It's basically right there for you. Wow. Well, let's talk about the clouds in this world. There's Nimble, the cloud you race, and Nimbo, the cloud up in the up on the not the tippy top, but the one of the tops that can control the state of the riverbed. And I believe Nimble is the... Is it the cousin, or is he the uncle? Nimbo the uncle, or...
I think the exposition was that Nimbo is Nimble's uncle.
Okay. Well, Nimble is a lady cloud, and she is the racing enthusiast. And you have to race her twice, as far as I'm aware. One on the dried riverbed, and then once when you get Nimbo to snow and freeze the riverbed over.
And this comes back to what we were talking about with Rextro and being able to retry things. Mm-hmm. Because I was able to beat Nimble's first challenge after not too much headache once I figured out what I needed to do to refill the stamina meter.
And sometimes
but I had a lot more trouble with the icy environment.
Sometimes it's just a matter of lining up with the butterflies, too. There would be a couple times I thought I'd be perfectly lined up, and I would jump, and I would miss the butterflies, which was frustrating. But, yeah, the icy one, it just gave me a headache, and then you miss one of the hoops, and then you can't just exit the race. You have to wait for Nimble to finish. So
I mean,
that's
granted, it is a little bit at least merciful that Nimble functions a little bit like how Boggy did in the original game, where if you fall really, really far behind to the point where there's just no realistic chance of you catching up, the race will automatically end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't had that occur yet. I've just I've been close enough, I guess, that Nimble has just... I've had to wait for Nimble to beat me, so...
Yeah, I've been annoyingly... like close enough not to trigger anything of that sort, but also pretty much unwinnable because there is Nimble kind of doesn't really give you an inch in terms of catching up if you fall behind in the second race.
In the second race, no. Yeah, it's quite frustrating. Part of me tried to stay ahead of Nimble at one point and just let her push me, but that didn't really pan out for too long.
And I was at least somewhat, I guess, less frustrated getting the line of dialogue from Laylee after you lose, where she points out that this race isn't fair at all because you're racing a floating cloud.
Right.
and you don't have any traction problems.
Nimbo, I love that Nimbo is having domestic problems. Just that sense of crushing ordinariness that we talked about.
It reminded me of Terry and Banjo-Tooie, how you have this one little tidbit you can learn about him that his wife recently left him, and he's acting as a single father to all of his eggs, and that's part of why he's so irate.
Yeah. And here Nimbo the Cloud's wife leaves him for a typhoon. So just that level of absurdity, I love it. And then there's a whole lot of urination jokes to be had with Nimbo, because he's got anxiety issues as a result, self-esteem issues, and then he's nervous because Yooka-Laylee are watching him, which any man who's ever tried to urinate at a urinal with other men around will sympathize with. I am a nervous peer, apparently.
So, something I liked about how Nimbo's function in this, not his bodily, well, yes, his bodily function, was integrated into how this world works is, well, let's start off. His whole gimmick is that you can feed him the various elemental, what are they, like berries or fruit or
berries, yeah.
things that Yuka can eat that have elemental properties, and have him affect the weather of the world a little bit. And rather than what I had first imagined when I could kind of clue into what this character was going to be about was, oh, I'm gonna feed him snow, and then the world will just be like covered in snow for no logistical reason. Sort of like how when you patch up Leaky and Banjo-Kazooie, you see the water level in Treasure Trove Cove's sandcastle go down, even though he doesn't physically interact with it at all.
Right.
This, they actually build in the clever explanation that he's sitting on top of a waterfall that drains into a lake that forms the basis of the track you race Nimble around.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was like a really clever, practical way to portray how his abilities were working.
And the nice thing is he continually rains or continually snows unless you turn that off with, say, the fire, or whatever you use to cancel it out. So that, yeah, it is a practical, logistical, in-universe explanation for the changing conditions. I like Nimbo. I think Nimbo might be my favorite character in this world. Shovel Knight, though. Everybody wants to talk about Shovel Knight.
Shovel Knight.
Yay. I know you wanted to bring up that this is a guest character, and it's acknowledged as the guest character, but he's never really treated like a bigger deal. In the reveal trailer for Shovel Knight, they treated him like a big deal, but in the game itself, he's essentially just a normal, mindless idiot who asks for your help.
Right. There's some conversational dialogue that alludes to the fact that he is the star of his own game.
Uh-huh.
But there's not really... This isn't like he accompanies you for this entire section of the level, or like the music abruptly shifts to his theme or anything. It's... He's just a guy standing around like everybody else there, and that's kind of nice about his appearance, I guess, in a way.
Well, I also like how he's completely helpless because he's not used to 3 dimensions. So that's a nice explanation for why he is asking for your help when he's supposed to be this great hero. He's helpless as a baby in this context, which also plays into our whole, well, critics sure do love 8-bit throwbacks, but they can't stand the 3D platforming revivals. So it's a nice little bit of comeuppance in my own little brain to have the quintessential 8-bit revival character completely worthless.
And just from like obviously we're on Hivan, we get a kick out of characters interacting with each other in this greater world, and I like that Shovel Knight, who's this character from a game I really, really like, In stores now, people go buy it. He can just sort of show up in this world casually, and people know who he is. They recognize him, and just this nature of this big deal character so casually being here.
Yeah,
and they do kind of do a little bit of a synergy thing with this game, where the thing he wants you to accomplish is climbing to the top of a tall structure and getting a gem for him. Which, in the context of Shovel Knight, I thought was a little bit weird, because gems, they're the currency of Shovel Knight. They're like something you would grab and you would want to grab and pick up, but they're not like game critical items. There's an endless supply of them. It's like a coin in Mario, but like of a varying value. And granted, I think the one you pick up for him is like the second most valuable type in the game.
Okay, so the gem itself was actually inspired by Shovel Knight.
It was. And maybe it's kind of a little bit funny that he feels that's worth giving up a Pagey for, because to him, the Pagey is kind of probably worthless.
Right. Despite the fact that if you collect enough of them, you can rewrite the laws of the universe. But he doesn't know that.
But another interesting thing I want to bring up is, in a sort of joking way, after you help sort out Shovel Knight's problems, there's this joking allusion to the idea that Yooka and Laylee might pay back the cameo.
Right, which I'd be okay with. Sure, I'll buy Shovel Knight too, if it means Yooka and Laylee are in it.
I think there's like the rumor mill was they might make if they did do a sequel, and I really hope this isn't just the rumor mill, because I'd love to see them do it, is that the sequel would be a 16-bit throwback called Super Shovel Knight.
Oh, that would be great.
But
again,
again,
the 16-bit era doesn't get enough respect. Just like this 64-bit era doesn't, so yeah.
But that's probably a good ways off, because the Shovel Knight team's been really good about delivering these DLC campaigns that are, in some cases, are arguably better than the main adventure, depending on who you ask. But I know that it would definitely make a lot of people in our community happy, because there's been sort of this recurring effort by DK Vine's hangers-on to kind of force the square peg into a round hole and make Shovel Knight retroactively part of the Donkey Kong universe, because everybody loves it.
Yeah. Specifically Mitchell Wolf, future former staffer. I can't keep up with that, but
and current former.
Yeah, I think, Mitchell, you're just going to have to accept that Shovel Knight is at Saberman status in the Donkey Kong universe. Almost, but not quite there. He is a character that has of some importance within the Donkey Kong universe now, but he'll never be a native-born son. Sorry. Just the way it is.
Or at the very least, maybe the Avenue isn't proving that the airship enthusiast is Drumstick.
You're right. Which, I remember the day that became a thing, and I was like, I remember Chad was all for it, Mitchell was for it, and I was just like, no, guys, come on.
Kudos to Yacht Club Games for playing ball with that and encouraging it, like the rebellious children.
Cartos. Let's talk about Cartos. What do you think about, one, the character, and two, the minecart, I guess, challenge?
I really like the character's design. This is a Kev Bayless character, and I really like what they've come up with him, with his handlebar mustache being formed out of two bent planks.
Yes.
And this is another character where if you have the digital manual with the art book, seeing this guy's concept art made me laugh out loud. Just the way that they arrived at him, and you can tell it's Kev's artwork. But just there's an early sketch where it's a minecart with like a very bushy like old man Saberman mustache. But yeah, I like that. I like his voice. The minigame, I feel like I would need to spend time with in future worlds to form a more, a less fleeting opinion, because when I played this, the main thought in my mind was just how far out of my mind I had to put the idea that this was anything like Tropical Freeze's minecart stages.
Yeah, that was my problem too. I feel like Tropical Freeze had the definitive 2.5D minecart stages, and it took a while to adjust to this. Which, if anybody should do minecart stages the best, it should be the Donkey Kong series. But this was a little hard to kind of get the hang. I mean, I didn't have any issues. I got the Pagey on my first go around. I'm sure they get a lot more difficult.
La-di-da for you.
On. Well, I'm
see
sure
him bringing it back around.
There we go. But I'm sure they get way more difficult later on in future Grand Tomes. But the only issue I had with the character himself was he said nobody cares about minecarts anymore or something, and I felt like they could have made a Minecraft joke there.
I do think that's a weird thing to kind of get. That's also kind of a weird point of humor, because we just got a brand new Donkey Kong Country game.
Plus, Trump said he's going to bring the coal mining jobs back. So what is Cartos complaining about? And I grounded to a halt. Let's go on to Blaststee. I take it back. Nimbo is not my favorite character in Tribalstack Tropics. Blaststee is my favorite character. This guy, just like Banjo-Tooie was a darker Banjo-Kazooie, Blaststee is a much more twisted version of Blasto. This guy's a fucking psychopath. I love it.
I love the whole progression of this challenge.
Yeah. Just getting up there, though, like, surprised me. I was just exploring a little bit. I didn't even realize I could get up there through some casual finessing. How did you get up to Blaststee?
I honestly can't even remember. I think that particular area was just me. Like, there are several ways up that particular temple, and I think I was kind of just throwing things, like, metaphorically throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck, and kind of got up there that way.
Yeah,
it did help, and this might be another advantage to not expanding the worlds right away, that it did that sort of pan over to establish he was in there.
I think I got up there two different ways. The whole area with the blowing vents, I was able to maneuver my way up that way, and then I also went to the left and just climbed up the wall and was able to get up that way. So, but yeah, I was proud that I got up to him. I was like, I don't know if there's actually a more legit way to do this or not, but I got up there. And Blaststee just cracks me up. The fact that he tries to convince Yooka and Laylee that he wants
to give them presents.
He wants to give them presents because he's friends with them, and he really just wants to murder them.
Them being a rotating, like, floating object of the vent face baddies.
Yeah, and then he the mask drops immediately once you start firing on them, and he just gets vindictive and vengeful and bloodthirsty. Just like
pure bloodthirstiness by the end of it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna account it as a Donkey Kong Country 3 reference. The fact that he gives them balls out of a cannon as a birthday present. It's a stretch, but I'm gonna take it. It's a Donkey Kong Country 3 reference.
Did people just keep regifting that thing?
Yeah, right. That goddamn bowling ball. Nobody wants it.
Maybe I owe Blue an apology. I always figured he was just kind of an ungrateful prick.
Rampo. Let's talk about the boss. The boss that isn't there until you expand the world. But all the same, what'd you think about Rampo?
Okay, this is something I think we brought up a lot talking about certain Banjo-Kazooie characters, where you kind of blur the line whether or not Banjo and Kazooie are kind of actively being sociopaths to some of the enemies they run across.
Right.
Like, this was very much in the vein of breaking into Lord Wu Fok Fok's locker with the intention of robbing him blind and then killing him to get the reward.
Right. Now, you don't kill Rampo. You don't kill him.
Like, do you want to explain what the deal is with Rampo when you first meet him?
So Rampo is essentially a sentient stone golem almost. He's got a cyclops eye, but he's essentially just sitting atop of a large ramp, hence his name. It's not a really creative name, but it does describe him perfectly. He is a ramp man, and he mistakes you for a door-to-door salesman, right? Essentially selling glass, a glass salesman. Windows, I guess. And because you're after the pagey he most certainly has, you proceed, and you have to go up his ramp using the roll. Go up his ramp, and he will roll down logs or twigs or branches or something from his mouth, and you have to jump over and evade them, which is a lot easier than you initially think it is.
Yeah, this was, I think, my very first death in the game. My Rampo First Blood, if you will. Because I didn't clue into the fact initially that you could jump while rolling on the ramp to get over the logs.
You just thought you had to avoid them. Yeah.
I tried to slowly turn around them, and you very quickly find out that you can't really do that in near enough time.
Well, especially on round 3 when there's just straight rows of them coming down. But yeah, if you haven't gotten a hang of the rolling mechanic by the time you're at Rampo, he will force you to get good at it. And then you get up to him, and he breathes fire that you have to jump over, and then you essentially just knock out his teeth. And you do this 3 times, and then he falls over, which is fantastic because he stays fallen over. And you can do things like walk on his eye and ground pound it, and he will comment that you are basically torturing him.
Again, shades of Lord Wu Fok Fok from Banjo-Tooie.
Rampo, I saw the art for him, the renders that Playtonic released on their Twitter for the character of the day, and I didn't think much of Rampo until I met Rampo, and I fought him, and I beat him. And I kind of love Rampo now. He's got a lot of personality, and I like that much more so than Target Zan did. So I'm all about Rampo. Rampo for the DK Vine Hall of Fame 2017. Wrapping things up in Tribalstack, I gotta ask this, Cameron. Did you find the secret item?
The skull?
The pirate treasure, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't really I don't really understand what that is yet. I'm not at the point yet, but yeah, I did find it, and I'm kind of curious what that's going to lead into.
Doesn't show up on the total screen. It's interesting.
And that was another, again, I think a thing that was alluded to in the manual, but in a very kind of obtuse way.
Yeah, I know. I knew about it because of the PlayStation, the official magazine in the UK. They did a cover story on Yooka-Laylee, and they brought up that this was something they added to the game kind of last minute. This pirate treasure, and they're not going to say what it's for. So I don't know. I'm not spoiled. I'm not spoiled whatsoever. I know a lot of you have beaten the game, but part of me is wondering, does this tie into some sort of fucking stop and swap situation? I don't know.
I certainly hope we see more out of Platonic.
Because did you also discover
all the breadcrumbs they're laying in this?
Did you also discover the skeleton, the weird alcove with the skeleton in it? And part of me, in my head, said, "Well, this would be a place for a question mark egg." So I don't know what is coming, but I have a feeling something is coming, and I'm kind of like looking out for weird things now, like that's gonna pay off later, isn't it? It's like a giant baby skeleton. I don't even know what it is, but I love that this game is making me feel these feelings, though. They're good feelings to have. Haven't felt this way in a long, long time.
Exciting thoughts of dead babies.
Whatever gets you through the night, man. We got a couple calls to take, so let's hear what some of the listeners thought about Yooka-Laylee and some of their first impressions on World 1.
Hello, this is Jewish Hoser, and I know I haven't been on here for a long time. I kind of took a hiatus, so I apologize. But I wanted to give my first impression of Yooka-Laylee, and this will be completely spoiler-free. But actually, I just recently, within the last couple hours, 100%ed it, and got all the way done with it finally. Every achievement, everything like that, and so I can't really give my first impression anymore, because I mean it's done and I'm played through it. But what I can say is, holy cow. This may be a bold statement, but I'm going to go as far to say that I like it more than Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. I think that it is a better game in every way, shape, and form. And I know that that's a huge statement to make, but hear me out. With Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, yeah, those were my childhood and a lot of people's. But there's points in those games that I dread, that when I get to it, it's my stopping point and I don't like playing any farther because it's hard for me. And I still love them. I would still get through them because the games are worth it, but those parts were still there, like Pterodactyl Land or Click Clock Wood. I didn't like them. Yooka-Laylee, there was a lot of times where I was scared that I was getting to a point like that, but it never happened. The game just through and through is just amazing. And I don't get why all the critics are reviewing it the way they are. It literally did what it was supposed to do. Do they not get what the game was supposed to be? I feel like they're judging this game like an entirely different genre, or we're expecting something completely different, and I don't know, I don't understand it, because they delivered. They completely did, they pulled out all the stops. I don't want to say anything specific, because like I said, no spoilers. But the game is amazing, and I mean, I've literally just been playing it straight since it came out to finish it, and all I can say is, as far as my first impressions, is that I hope reviews don't hurt the sales, because I want to see more from Platonic. If their games are going to be like this, then I will keep just throwing money into their hands. It's not even funny. Anyways, that was about it. I will talk to you all later.
Wow. Well, thank you for the call, a Jewish Hoser, and high praise. He's 100% of the game and better than Banjo.
Wow, these reviews are running the gamut.
Well, I think I would trust Jewish Hoser over Kotaku any day of the week.
I mean, he's clearly played the entire thing. That's
and he's clearly a fan of banjo, of this type of genre, this type of game. So, speaking as a fellow fan, I'm going to heed his word and look forward to what's to come. Because part of me has been a little apprehensive. Yeah, I'm enjoying the ukulele right now, but what if like the bottom drops out at a certain point and the game just becomes utter shit? Like, what if the critics are right? And I'm kind of stealing myself, but man, Jewish Hoser is giving me hope. So thank you for the call, and I don't begrudge you for beating the game so quickly. Honestly, I wish I had the time to. I'm not saying you have a lot of free time. I'm not insulting you. I'm digging myself in a hole again here, Cameron. As somebody who's never played Shovel Knight, I am quite adept at digging. Apparently,
it's the catch-22 of doing stuff for DK Vine that you wear yourself then to the point where you fall behind on the kind of games that made you want to run DK Vine.
It is true, though. I mean, I haven't played Yooka-Laylee nearly as much because I am writing about Yooka-Laylee. It's a paradox.
It's like people I know who work at comic book shops and are like perpetually 3 books behind on all their favorite series.
Yeah. So I am essentially the comic book guy from The Simpsons at this point.
Much better hair.
Thank you. I do put a lot of work into my hair. All right, let's take another call.
Hey, Kongversation pals. This is Mitchell Wolf here, talking about Tribalstack Tropics. There are 2 cloud characters on this level. There's Nimbo, who is the cloud that you can interact with using the elemental berries to create rain or snow. And there is Nimble, the cloud with a 64 decorated racing helmet. And you race that one around a track. And this raises a bit of a question because Laylee tells Nimble that we talked to, I guess, Nimble's uncle. She says uncle. And there's nothing that Nimbo said to actually imply that Nimble is related to Nimbo. It certainly could be true. It could also just be Laylee being racist against clouds and assuming that they all are related or know each other. How canon do you think we can take this as? Is Nimbo really Nimble's uncle, or is this something Laylee was just kind of saying? Thanks. Bye.
No, I think I've gotten it in dialogue where it's confirmed that they are actually related. So I don't think it's necessarily that Laylee is a huge racist towards clouds. But I wouldn't be opposed to that either, because I think it's inherently funnier when you can say somebody is racist towards clouds. So let's go with that. By the way, that was Mitchell Wolf, by the way. Future staff.
I don't think I got the dialogue that confirms it, but I think I just assumed it was a shot in the dark from Laylee.
Yeah. Maybe I hallucinated it, but I'm pretty sure it's essentially confirmed. Anyway, Mitchell, maybe we can discuss this more because you are going to be co-hosting the conversation with me for at least one of our ukulele episodes coming up. So I look forward to you being on the show again on this side of the microphone. Until then, you can save all of your confounding curveballs you'd like to throw at me as far as canon and canonicity and continuity goes. You can save them until then and just completely throw me off my game when we're actually trying to do the show. All right, we got one more call, and then I think we need to wrap up the episode so I can actually play ukulele a little bit more so I can be ready for the next episode. Okay, let's hear what this caller has to say.
Hey guys, it's Seth calling. just got Yooka-Laylee, had to call in, give some thoughts about it. First of all, I think the atmosphere is great. Played around in that first world around the batship crazy for a long time, just reveling in the atmosphere. I do think overall there are some huge issues, though. The hub world itself is a mess. There's no clear direction anywhere. I think the controls are fine. I think the interaction between Yooka and the actual atmosphere is not. There are some things that are unclear if you can jump on them, unclear if you're going to collide with them. I had a major issue with the first boss-ish, Rampo. Just the mechanics of getting all the way up, hitting one of the logs, then sliding down and taking additional damage from more logs just seemed poorly thought out. The fact that characters are just sort of plopped into areas, the same characters are just in every world, it just feels kind of ugh. But my question is, where does the line of piss take, purposefully bad for the sake of being bad, and poor design lie? Where's that line? Where do you draw that line? Okay, that's it. Goodbye. Love the show. Goodbye forever.
Thank you for the call, Seth. Okay, yeah, running the gamut here. He had some positive things to say, and then it quickly veered into the negatives a bit. Well, I wouldn't say that any of the design of Yooka-Laylee is supposedly a piss take. I'm not having the issues you're having with it per se. I mean, I think the issues you brought up aren't insurmountable. Again, it's you're not sure if you can jump on this or not. I think you just kind of have to assume at a certain point you can probably jump on it, so long as it's not a slippery slope.
I think this is a really interesting thing to come up, because it's sort of what I was touching on earlier, how multiple people can look at the same aspect of a game,
right,
have completely different thoughts on it, and neither one of them is necessarily wrong.
Yeah, and where like Seth is experiencing these things and having a much more profoundly dark reaction to them than we did, where we would experience these things and we would have trouble with it, but we would kind of just shrug it off, and I'm not saying Seth is in the wrong for not being able to shrug it off, because some of these things might be game breakers for people. It's just all in how what we look for and what we kind of experience, maybe in a certain order. Like I said, the design of Tribalstack, for example, because again, it sounds like you might be a little bit further than we are. The design of Tribalstack kind of grew on me over time, and what seemed like bad design at first kind of revealed itself to be slightly more elegant, if a little bit more freewheeling than I was anticipating later on. So I don't know if I have any suggestions for you, or if you're actually soliciting suggestions. I just have to say, like, keep an open mind as you play, because that can make all the difference in the world. Sorry that you're having a bit of a rough go at it, but I am glad you are able to derive some enjoyment from it, from the atmosphere and what have you. And anything you would like to add to Seth there, Cameron?
I would just say, as to the question of like whether like perceived design flaws are piss takes or not, I think when Playtonic does something as a piss take, you'll know when it's a piss take.
Right. Now, it does kind of harken into the discussion we had, where we were pondering what the difference was between recreating the kind of game of the day, warts and all, versus modernizing it until it's something that's unrecognizable.
Yeah, the I think what I said last time was authenticity versus accessibility.
Yeah. And I don't know, because I'm sure you're an old pro at these type of games too, Seth. So I'm not sure, what to tell you. I think
I'm not an old pro at any types of games.
You're old, Cameron. Just face it. You're in your mid-20s. That's
I wasn't
old.
I wasn't challenging the old. I was challenging the pro.
Oh, okay. You're on the DK Vine staff. You can at least fake it that you're good at these sort of games. Yeah, it might be like the modernization of all the surfaces being something you can interact with or climb on, or something that's kind of throwing things. That, I mean, it threw me at first too, and I've kind of just embraced it. But yeah, I don't know. I'll tell you what, Seth. You said bye forever, but I definitely want you to call in as we continue to do these. I want to hear your thoughts on the later worlds and to see how your opinion kind of changes. Because I feel like it's kind of hard for us to meet at a middle ground right now, because we're kind of limiting ourselves to World 1 discussion. This is a dialogue I want to keep having with you. So let's continue it. If you can, keep calling in whenever we do these. And I will be glad to continue the debate and to see where it gets us.
I'm kind of wondering if the final call will just be a tired scream.
All right. Well, let's give our final thoughts on the discussion at hand, though. So, Cameron, having spent some extensive time with Yooka-Laylee,
the time I've spent could generously be called that.
Okay. More time than you spent on Sunday, let's just say. Are the critics totally off base with this game? Or do you think it's just a matter of not being given a fair shake?
Well, and this is going to be one of those wishy-washy non-answers, but it depends on which critics you're looking at and what they've had to say. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, what I can say is this isn't going to be a game for everyone, but if it is for you, you're going to enjoy the hell out of it. And I mean, let's face it, any opinion I give is... I'm not going to give any sort of illusion that I'm in any way objective, because I love these guys, I love the style of the work they put out, and I want them to succeed, and I want to love what they do, and I do love it.
Yeah. I mean, this game, I've gotten so much enjoyment from it. I said on Sunday that I haven't had this much fun with a officially released game since Grab by the Ghoulies. And I do stand by that. So I guess what I would like to say is the following. A note to the hate-filled Yooka-Laylee internet critics. You're all arseholes. Yooka-Laylee is the best game of all time. Of course, you've all slowly become biased towards certain types of games through your years of drug usage that it doesn't really matter what you think anymore. I pity anyone that doesn't buy this game for the reasons that IGN was too nitpicky about the camera angles, gun toters wanting a perfect dark spiritual successor for excessive violence this Easter, etc. You can't take these slapnuts seriously. You may be thinking, but then how can we take Mr. Slush seriously if he carves Yuka's body out of bread mold every night? I can tell you the answer to that. I don't dump on good games. I admit that Breath of the Wild was a great game, one of the best Switch games ever made. I admit that, when it comes out, Super Mario Odyssey will be a great game. There are countless more games I could list on and on. However, the fact of the matter is that this is a Donkey Kong Universe website. It's not our job to do reviews for Zelda or Mario. If we had to, then they would get high scores. No, the job of reviewing games of different series and many different genres go to the IGN and Nintendo dorks of the world. Nintendo dorks? To a lesser extent, they go to the Rarenets of the world, who review all the games that a single company makes. There is a biased opinion that's been brewing for a few years, though. Miyamoto has almost become god to the reviewers on Nintendo sites. Oh, Miyamoto can do no wrong. When Miyamoto is bested, as he was in Super Mario 64, BK and DK64 beat it, and Mario Kart 64, DKR beats it. The gaming sites can't handle it and look for every problem they can find. When they can't find any problems, they usually take the smallest thing they can find and blow it out of proportion to something they claim not only makes the game bad, but disgraces the system. Honestly, Miyamoto is the most overrated game designer in the world. Playtonic is superior in nearly every aspect of game designing. Yet, they're not the internet favorites. Their Donkey Kong Universe game threatens Miyamoto's series of platformers. The difference between opinions are quite clear. Look at IGN's review of Super Mario 64 and Yooka-Laylee. YL got put under the microscope, then sliced up, then examined again, then sliced up, then examined, then sliced, microscoped, examined. Super Mario 64's review was unscathing, especially when the game has more faults than YL does. In these sites' cases, they will do anything to put Miyamoto on a pedestal. The same as Playtonic, but anytime they threaten the holiest of holies, they will kick them to the gutter. Why do they have such sad devotion to one man? Maybe it's because their first real game was a Miyamoto-produced game, and they feel they owe something to him. Maybe they never want that feeling of the first video game to ever go away. Playtonic is full of talented developers, while Miyamoto is just one man. These hotshots are threatening a man who first gave them that non-sexual feeling, so they will do whatever possible to protect him, right? If you're a proud Yooka-Laylee fan, don't let these comments get to you. We hope this helped clear up the ridiculous negative comments spewing around the internet.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.